What? What are you laughing at?
You've changed so much. But then again, so have I.
I'm mysterious. What are you talking about? This is my this is my Halloween costume. See? I've been fooled by Satan because I celebrate Halloween. Therefore, that's why. That's actually hard to see. I'm not wearing that. Anyway, welcome to the channel, everyone. I'm back with not Jim Gaffigan, who doesn't look like Jim Gaffigan, but he does sound like Jim Gaffigan, and he has the same hair color as Jim Gaffigan. Therefore, people confuse him with Jim Gaffigan. So I made sure no one thought he was Jim Gaffigan. So welcome back to the channel, Will.
Is this just going to be the entire show? Yeah. Is this all he does?
You see?
How are you guys doing?
Yeah.
Well,
all right.
You guys being all one of you.
Yeah. So everyone is Halloween, and everyone knows what we do at Halloween. We deal with fundamentalists and Christians who don't know history about the origins of Halloween and constantly telling us it's evil and pagan and we shouldn't celebrate it because we all know the devil's evil plan for world domination is gingivitis, ladies and gentlemen. He will destroy the human race one cavity at a time, and that's why he started Halloween, so he can spread his evil through candy.
It's the most effective method ever devised, if we're being honest.
You see? Absolutely. It's the most evil method I've ever seen ever, and it totally works. Yeah. So yeah, every year for probably about the past 10 years now, maybe not that long, I've had to deal with people claiming Christmas is pagan, Easter is pagan, Valentine's Day is pagan, and Halloween is pagan. And of course, every year I say, no, it isn't. Halloween also gets a little extra nonsensical because you also have these conservative Christians going, it's so evil. How could we participate in this evil satanic holiday? And they have the dumbest arguments ever. So I finally just had it this year, and that's why the stream is titled what it is. We should celebrate Halloween. I said it. I'm sick and tired of every year saying it's not evil. Stop worrying about it. No, you know what? You know what, Christians? We should celebrate Halloween. I'm done. I'm done playing with you. Stop being cowards. Stop trying to worry the devil has extra power this night. Like, okay, yeah. So that's what's going on. How are you doing, Will? What are your thoughts on Halloween?
I mean, as I've mentioned before, I'm a Catholic, and so the Halloween is a major part of my liturgical calendar.
Because you worship Satan.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, so actually, that was one of the fun things about this particular video was that he gets towards the end and he's talking about very specifically All Souls Day customs. And if you just listen to even what's being said, even the part that he's reading, it's like, okay, clearly this is an All Souls Day custom. He's like, clearly pagan, and I'm like, okay. I mean, I'm used to accusations of paganism as a Catholic, but it's usually not also coupled with the Halloween stuff. I will admit but there are a lot of things to say. I was thinking about how I felt bad for you because it's every year. It's every year. It's a cycle. It's a cycle all on its own that you have to deal with these exact same, like, just sets of horrible, disgustingly inaccurate things that people say all across the internet. It's like it doesn't even matter how many times you slap it down, it just comes up again. And you mentioned the core four of Christmas, Easter, Halloween, and Valentine's Day. I'm sure they'll add St. Patrick's Day in there at some point, just They just haven't figured out how to do it yet.
Oh, I had to do a video, I think a year and a half ago on St. Patrick's Day. One of these crazy New Agers was arguing that St. Patrick's Day is the day you celebrate the genocide. I'm not making this up, of Gnostic Egyptians living in Ireland. I wish you can't. It's so crazy you cannot make it up. But I had to do a video explaining St. Patrick's Day is not the day you celebrate the genocide of Egyptian Gnostics living in Ireland. But here we are. So
I mean, I thought it was the day of the Guinness.
Yeah, the day of the Guinness. But today we're going to be responding to a big YouTuber, is a Christian named Isaiah Saldivar, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. He posts a bunch of videos and gets things wrong, unfortunately, a lot. This is one of those where he's going to be arguing Halloween is pagan because he used Google once. Again, I wish I was making this up. He used Google once. He typed in Halloween is pagan. He found an article from the History Channel and then assumed every baseless claim made in that article was true.
Yeah, and I will admit, Halloween it's a little bit different from the whole Christmas or Easter is pagan thing, simply because of the fact that, unlike with those two holidays, and Valentine's Day is just weird, but unlike with those two holidays, it's so commonly just accepted by every single person who talks about this, outside of more recent scholarship and like just people who actually try to dig into the sources. It's just so widely accepted by everyone who talks about this that Halloween comes from like Samhain. And I was mentioning to you before the stream started, it's fascinating to me because I just decided to do a little bit of extra going through like some background research, making sure I dotted all of my T's and crossed all my I's. Yes, I meant to say it like that. And it's just surprising to me how much nothing there is behind the actual claims that are being made.
No,
like,
there's nothing.
Even just the basic stuff like that, that Samhain was like the new year. There isn't even any evidence that Samhain is the beginning or the end of the year for Irish Celtic pagans.
Yeah, what I've seen the historians say that it's debatable. Some do say Samhain was the new year, but I think the more recent scholars who've written on it are either agnostic about it or say no, the new year was in the spring or like the beginning of summer.
Well, yeah. So we don't actually have a good example of a Celtic calendar, except for one, and that doesn't list the end of summer as it doesn't list anything like Samhain as its new year. My point isn't so much that no scholar has said that Samhain is the end of the old year or the beginning of the new one. My point is that it's like I've genuinely tried to find what is the text, what's the calendar, what's the whatever, what is the primary source behind the idea that Samhain is the beginning of the end of the old year or the beginning of the new year or both. I don't care which one you choose.
Well, we'll go over some sources. We'll go over some sources in a little bit here. But first, let me get to some of your super chats. You guys can put them in, and we will go through those. Google Ye Key IP, who denies dinosaurs or dragons? Okay, so I'll just share my screen here since I already got that up. So I did, and it looks like a flying dinosaur. All right, but I have a video. Let me just share my screen again here on this whole issue. It's called "Did Humans Live with Dinosaurs?" This one right here, and I talk about that in this video. That I actually argue that we have ancient texts from the Roman and the Greco-Roman era, where they found probably fossils and interpret them as dragons and griffins and cyclopses. So yeah, I would be perfectly fine thinking the bones of those ancient people thought were dragons, because we do have evidence of them finding giant bones and making assumptions about them. So yeah, that's not a problem.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly a very plausible interpretation. Just to give my 2 cents as someone who doesn't have any qualifications in the matter, but I think that's a very plausible interpretation of the data. Just to give one example, I think you might have even given this in one of your videos, but I encountered it independently. a lot of the stories of cyclopses originate in areas where we have mammoth skeletons, or mammoth skulls in particular. And because of the way the mammoth skull is structured, the horn hasn't the look of an eye for a skull, and so you can imagine what you're looking at, a skull, and it's a massive skull, and it looks like it just has one big eye in the middle. It's very reasonable to look at that and say, well, this must have been a human being. And yeah, I mean, humans are storytelling creatures, and we will draw on virtually anything to tell a story, even if we haven't seen a particular example of it.
The crazy part is that he thought it was Gnostic Egyptians. It was obviously the Han Taoists that were slaughtered in Ireland. That is correct, sir.
I mean, the evidence is incontrovertible, honestly, on that.
Yeah. It was a clip from the Gaia channel, which is like the History Channel on steroids in terms of crazy. And so he's just going over, and I think he was talking with that host who used to do Coast to Coast. And he just goes on this big long tangent about how there was these Gnostics in Ireland who escaped from Egypt, and St. Patrick was sent there by the Catholic Church to slaughter them because they were worshiping serpents. And that's where the whole myth about St. Patrick chasing out the serpents comes from. And I'm like, good God, dude, have you ever opened a book, or do you just like
base St. Patrick?
Do you have like darts and you have just like words on there and you go, all right, we're going to have Gnostics and they're going to be in Ireland and Egyptians. Like that's what it really was. And it's like he didn't say that exact sentence, but that was the whole story he was sowing. It sounds like
I should totally do that for a video at some point. Just take 4 completely random concepts and just put them and just randomly select which ones they are, and just make a video where I reveal the truth about it.
It's crazy. It sounds like something a crazy fantasy author would come up with. I mean, like, cool like theory, like a cool like fantasy book about like these Egyptian Gnostics escaped to Ireland and then they fought like the sword battles with St. Patrick. I mean, like, there you go. There's your fantasy novel right there. If someone can take that and roll with it, you got it. Just credit.
Yeah, I'll have to I'll have to post the video at some point. Oh, sorry, I'll have to write that book at some point.
You are the master of dispelling fear, Michael. Well, much appreciated, Caroline. We're going to get into this video, and we're going to show Halloween is not evil. It is not pagan. It has evil modern elements in it that we don't have to participate in. But I'll hit this point again. Just because people are greedy at Christmas, that does not mean we have to stop celebrating Christmas. Just because people are lustful on St. Valentine's Day, that does not mean we have to stop celebrating St. Valentine's Day. And just because people celebrate death on Halloween, and witches do a bunch of make-believe rituals, that doesn't mean we cannot celebrate Halloween. It does not logically follow that just because worldly people have corrupted a holiday, that we cannot celebrate it in an honorable and moral fashion. And that's what we're going to be getting into. We're going to pull up Isaiah's video here and start responding to it. So if you don't know who he is, he's very popular. He's got almost 1 million followers on YouTube.
Yeah, I'll admit I was surprised at just how popular his channel seemed to be. Partially because I'd never heard of him, but then again, this isn't actually much my sphere anymore. So,
and it took a while for me to get a good thumbnail picture of him because I kept getting images like this, and I'm like, I can't use that. He looks like he's like old and like tired. I got to get it. Took me a while to like land on a good screenshot for the thumbnail. Ugh.
Right.
All right. I'm going to get into this. We're going to play about a minute or so, a minute and a half, and then I'm going to stop and we're going to discuss what he says. He's going to tell us Christians should not celebrate Halloween because it has dark, evil, pagan origins, and his sources literally, trust me, bro.
It's that time of year again where everyone's going to argue over Halloween. Should we dress our kids up? Should we not? One Christian camp says Halloween's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Dress your kids up as whatever. Take them trick-or-treating. Have your trick-or-treats. Have your Halloween celebrations at church. The other side says no.
Okay, well, first of all, real quick, the other side, our side, does not say you can dress them up as whatever. If they're going to celebrate death, some gory I'd say don't do that. Like, you know, like innocent costumes are fine. So this is just a straw man. That's not what we say.
Well, yeah.
There's sinister occult practices.
I did just want to say, just because of the fact that we're saying that we should be even if you had the most extreme form of like, okay, no one's going to say this, but you must celebrate Halloween. Even if someone were going to say that, you should still exercise prudence when it comes to the exercise of Halloween. You shouldn't be dressing up as demons. You shouldn't be dressing up unless it is like, and I even think that Christians need to be careful with this, unless it's like purely for mockery. But even in that situation, I personally still get a bit hesitant with that, contra what Lewis says. But yeah, like, just because of the fact that we're saying that you should celebrate Halloween doesn't mean that you need to embrace all the most horrific aspects of the current modern day American celebration of Halloween. That was all I was going to add for that.
Sinister occult practices, darkness happening. We shouldn't be celebrating darkness. We shouldn't be glorifying it. So I want to come in as a voice of reason and talk all about Halloween. I want to talk about what the History Channel has to say, a secular, obviously, company. I want to talk about what
Imagine
Bible
trusting
Info
the
has to say
History
about
Channel.
it. We're going to talk about trick-or-treating, and then I'm going to give you 5 quick, simple reasons why I do not celebrate Halloween. My kids, my family, we do not celebrate Halloween. So we're going to do all things Halloween in this video, and then you can make your decision at the end. Is this something you or your family should celebrate? This is going to be an interesting one. Stay tuned. Okay, so we're going to first look at the History Channel's article on Samhain. Some call it Samhain. It's pronounced Samhain because it's not a Christian publication. So I want to show you that even from a non-Christian perspective, Halloween, or what Halloween is. So Samhain, a Gaelic word pronounced Samhain, is a pagan religious festival originating from an ancient Celtic spiritual tradition. So off the bat here, it's spiritual. It is usually celebrated from October 31st to November 1st to welcome in the harvest and usher in the dark half of the year. Celebrants believe that the barriers between the physical world and the spirit world break down during Samhain, allowing more interaction between humans and denizens of the other world, which is AKA spirits. So already it's like, this is not a Christian publication here.
Okay, let's stop it right there. Okay, first off, all of that's wrong. All of that is just absolutely wrong. The History Channel is not a reliable source of information. Okay. Notice in that article, he is putting up, it has 0 citations. It's just, they're making these claims about Samhain.
Yeah.
None of that is true about Samhain. And I'm going to start sharing some slides here because I put up a bunch. Okay. So because Isaiah in the History Channel isn't going to give you the earliest references on Samhain, I will give you them. I have an article linked below that Tim O'Neill wrote that has a lot of this stuff in it. People think I just relied on him. That's not true. I actually uploaded a video debunking the Halloween pagan myth before his article. But he's got a really good article as well that I have drawn from as well. So I wanted to include that just so you show. So this is one of the earliest mentions of Samhain. Okay. It's the Martyrology of Oangus. It's a 9th century document, and it mentions Samhain on November 1st. Now, if you notice in the English off to the side here, it says they're calling it All Saints Day. That's a later mistranslation. Samhain does not translate to All Saints Day. People, this is a misunderstanding of a later translator. All it says is that this is the day of stormy Samhain. Samhain just means summer's end.
Right.
This is the day they concluded summer's end. Now, was it on November 1st? Oh, go ahead. What did you want to say?
Well, I was just going to say it is useful to understand what little information we actually do have about Celtic peoples, in that they did have a specific division for how the year worked, based on our understanding. And I'm hesitant here because of the fact that we talk about the Celts as if they're like a united group of people. When
they're not.
Okay, the Gaelic Irish Celts and the people living in Galatia, 2 completely separate groups of people with completely separate cultures, who shared a similar-ish language. That's really what we're talking about. So, okay, but Northwestern European Celts, they did seem to have a specific type of division when it came to how the year worked, similar to us, actually. Winter, spring, summer, and fall. Now they didn't put fall. They didn't put like the beginnings or endings of the seasons in the same way that we do. But honestly, after the Colonian calendar is actually our best. our best example of like a Celtic calendar.
So yeah, they didn't use a Julian calendar. November 1st is probably an approximation of when Samhain was, because they used a lunar solar calendar. And if you know, like the Jews used a lunar solar calendar, which is why their holidays shift day from year to year. So Passover is not always on the same day. Likewise, Samhain was probably not always on the same day. November 1st is probably a Christian approximation. We also have this. This is Sans Cormac, a 10th century document. This mentions a bunch of Celtic festivals like Beltane, for example, where they would drive cows between a fire. Ironic or interestingly enough, it does not mention any sort of rituals on Samhain. It doesn't mention Samhain, which is strange. You'd think if this is a major Celtic holiday or a Celtic holiday in general, it should mention it. It doesn't. The earliest mention we have of any of what Samhain was comes from the Surgling of Concullen. And it says every year the men of Ulster, so it's just the men of Ulster, were accustomed to hold festival together. And the time when they held it for 3 days before Samhain, the summer's end, and for 3 days after that day, and upon Samhain itself. And the time that is spoken of, that when the men of Ulster were in the plain of Murthem, and they used to keep that festival every year, nor was there anything in the world that they would do at that time except sports and marketing and splendors and pomps and feasting and eating. And it is from that custom of theirs that the festival of Samhain has descended, that is now held throughout the whole of Ireland. Will, did you notice anything about this early source?
Well, clearly they're sacrificing large amounts of cattle and dressing up in demonic costumes to ward off the spirits of the dead. What other interpretation is there?
Yeah, it doesn't mention anything associated with the dead. It doesn't mention any priestly rituals, anything associated with the supernatural. It's just that they celebrated the end of the summer by feasting and playing games, which is common in cultures because common before winter comes on, you kill a bunch of the animals so you don't have to keep taking care of them through the rough winters. You have a bunch of extra food. So that was a common thing to do. No rituals.
Yeah, I think it is
nothing associated with the dead.
Yeah. I think it's important to note that there's a practical purpose behind late fall or even early winter festivals. And that's like, well, like Mike was just saying, there's a real practical necessity behind, say, slaughtering the household pigs that you are raising throughout the year for the simple purpose of not having to feed them throughout. It's diminishing returns because you're not growing anything new and there's no forage being produced. And so any extra food that you're providing for, say, the pigs, or in certain circumstances, other livestock like cows or goats, it's simply diminishing returns because you're having to take out of your storage to continue to upkeep the animals. Now, I'm not going to mention this, but there are a variety of different agricultural calendars throughout the Middle Ages, especially the early Middle Ages, that we could go through just to demonstrate that these sorts of rhythmic patterns of feasting and celebrating were ingrained in the way that agricultural societies worked. Ireland's no different.
Yeah. Let me, there is, so this is, did I mention that this is 10th century, maybe earlier is when we get this. Now, in the 12th century, so in the 1100s, we do have a document mentioning supernatural aspects associated with Samhain. And all it says is the men of Ireland would basically participate in this wooing ritual on the fairy mounds. So they thought maybe the fairy world was much closer at this time, or more able to be communicated with or talked with. But this is late. This is 1100s. Paganism, for the most part, is not really having a strong effect on the people at this point. I mean, this is long after St. Patrick. This is long after the Christianization of Ireland.
And you also, and a massive part of the interesting thing about Ireland is that it did convert so thoroughly and so quickly after St. Patrick. By 500 even, all of Ireland is Catholic. Now, some scholars even will try to say, well, the church policy at the time wasn't just to simply eradicate all pagan customs and stuff like that, which is true to some degree, because of the fact that early Christians were capable of distinguishing which customs were pagan and which were non-pagan. But the thing that annoys me about I guess you guys can't see my mouse, but that's fine. The thing that annoys me specifically about citing this sort of document as an example of like paganism sneaking in is that we know where a lot of fairy stories were coming from throughout the course of the high and then late Middle Ages, and then even into the early modern and the modern eras. We know where they were coming from. We may not know precisely where they got all the ideas, but we know that they were coming from what was considered to be an acceptable Christian background.
Right.
That medieval Christians, and you can say that medieval Christians were wrong for this. That's perfectly fine. That doesn't matter. Point is that medieval Christians accepted that there were preternatural beings that weren't angels, they weren't demons, they weren't God or anything like that, but they weren't human. They were spirits, if you will. But they were perfectly willing to accept the idea that these things existed as a part of their world. That just sort of didn't fit, that seemed to be a little bit out there. And they developed customs around how to treat them and things like that. This isn't a holdover from paganism. This is just simply an aspect of the Christian culture of medieval Europe.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say is that you don't see, again, no pagan rituals, no pagan sacrifices, no associations with the idea that somehow some sort of like, you know, anything you could see here is nothing to do with what we get with our modern Halloween customs. It's just
perhaps most significantly, no trick-or-treating. You don't see anything along the lines of trick-or-treating here.
Yeah. Now, Ronald Hutton mentions another 12th century source. It's a legend about St. Patrick. And they say every year at Samhain, the firstlings of every issue and the chiefs, scions, I believe, of every clan would sacrifice to an idol. And he says the High King led the people to prostrate, and they flung themselves to the ground so hard that 3/4 would perish each year. Now, no one believes this actually happened, because for the simple reason that if 3/4 of the population perished each year, you wouldn't have anyone left after a decade, or you'd have. Like,
I don't know. Have you seen those Irish? They do breed like rabbits. I'm Irish, so I'm part Irish, so I'm allowed to say that.
Well, Hutton says this. He says the story sounds therefore like a medieval Christian fantasy, developing over time and growing more lurid with each retelling. The one note of realism in it is the description of the remains of the sanctuary that accompanies the story, which was said to be still in existence at the time when the text was composed, with the idols buried up to their heads in earth and a mark left by St. Patrick's staff visible on top of the biggest. It seems likely that a genuine pagan sanctuary had existed on the spot, perhaps the Standing Stones, which was linked to the lurid fable about Patrick. Now, he's like, so what he's basically arguing is this is very late, as we said, from when paganism had basically died out. You still had some, I would argue, still had some pagan folk customs happening in the countryside, sure, but this is just probably Christian fantasy. They knew there was an altar there, and they just developed crazy ideas about what actually happened there that have no basis in reality. So again, these are the earliest sources that mention anything ritual or supernatural associated with Samhain. It's not in our earliest sources. This is the best we can get.
And again, we always have to distinguish when we're talking about whether or not this, that, or the other custom came from paganism. We have to distinguish, okay, are we saying that it came from the idolatrous pagan religion, or are we saying that this was something that pagans did? Because the fact that it was something that pagans did didn't mean that it was associated with anything idolatrous or blasphemous or contrary to the true Christian religion. And again, the early Christians, even when you get into like the 600s, 700s, and 800s, and we can actually see this a lot in places like Lithuania and Poland and Russia and places like that. They were very good at figuring out what aspects of a given culture were unacceptable and which aspects of the culture were purely redeemable. And they did that with the early Christians did that with the Romans and the Greeks. They did that even with the Ethiopians. They did that with the Anglo-Saxons and the Germanic people. They did that with the continental Celts and Gaul and places like that. They were very capable of sussing out what aspects of a religion were blasphemous, what aspects of the religion were idolatrous, well, I shouldn't say religion, what aspects of the culture that they were converting was idolatrous, blasphemous, what have you. And getting rid of those things, but saying you don't have to just totally abandon all aspects of your culture in order to become Christian, which is true. So even if you did somehow prove that this, that, or the other aspect of Samhain came from practices that went back to paganism, which you haven't done. No one's ever done that, actually. But even if you could do that, you would have to prove that it is part of the idolatrous parts of the pagan religion of the Celtic people in Ireland that we got these Halloween traditions from.
All right. I want to go through the rest of these slides and then we'll get back to the video so we're safe on time. So let's get back to what's going on. So again, earliest sources that mention any ritual supernatural aspect, and historians are not convinced. The first one to really start to say that Samhain had religious aspects and ritual aspects was Geoffrey Keating. And this is in the 1600s.
Right.
The problem is that no modern historian thinks he's reliable. Okay, like Ronald Hutton says that basically he's an unreliable 17th century historian who was making things up based on folk traditions, legends that he could not track down. What does Hutton say? He says it must be concluded, therefore, that the medieval records furnish no evidence that November 1st was a major pan-Celtic festival, and that none of religious ceremonies even where it was observed. An Anglo-Saxon counterpart is difficult either to prove or to dismiss completely. Bede in his work on the calendar states that September had been called Halegmanath, while October was Vuncherfalith. I think November was Bloodmanath. He notes that Halegmanath meant holy month, but not why, and therefore neither can we. It is possible, as he said, that it derived from rites connected with the end of the grain harvest. The name for October signified the coming of the winter, while that for November meant blood month, and here Bede had some important information to offer. He stated that it derived from the annual slaughter of livestock in early winter to reduce the number that it had to be kept through the lean months, and that the victims were dedicated to the gods as sacrifices. There may here be a record of a festival of equivalent importance and even of simultaneous timing to Samhain, or it may be that the passage describes an agricultural process rather than event. Pagan Scandinavia had its own major festival of the opening of winter, the Winter Nights, which began on the Saturday in the week between the 11th and the 17th of October. So he's pointing out, what do we have? Okay, if there was any festivals happening, it would probably be in September. That's because there was Holy Month. November was called Bloodmanath because of certain sacrifices of these animals, but it doesn't tell us when that occurred. It just occurred sometime in the month. And Bede never connects that to Samhain. So this is why he says we have no evidence Samhain was a major pan-Celtic festival that had some sort of religious aspect. As far as we can tell, it was just a time for feasting, pomp, splendor to celebrate the end of summer. This is what Bede says in his book, The Reckoning of Time. He says Halegmanath, which means sacred rites, Winterfalith can be called by the invented composite name Winterful. Bloodmanath is month of immolations, for then the cattle which were to be slaughtered were consecrated to the gods. Now, in the Dictionary of English Folklore, they note in England since the 19th and increasingly the 20th century, Halloween has acquired a reputation as a night on which ghosts, witches, and fairies are especially active. Why this should be debated. Okay, they say currently it is widely supposed that it originated as a pagan Celtic festival of the dead related to the Irish and Scottish Samhain, marking the onset of winter, a theory popularized by Fraser. Certainly, Samhain was a time for festive gatherings in medieval and Irish texts, and later Irish, Welsh, and Scottish folklore use it as a setting for supernatural encounters, but there is no evidence that it was connected with the dead in pre-Christian times or that pagan religious ceremonies were held. One more scholar. Okay. In fact, there is no hard evidence that Samhain was specifically devoted to the dead or to ancestral worship. despite claims to the contrary by some American folklorists, some of whom have presumed that the feast was devoted to Samhain, or Samhain, I guess, god of the dead. Certainly, the feast was linked to the mythical peoples of Ireland. Accordingly to the ancient sages, Samhain was the time when tribal people paid tribute to their conquerors, and when the Cid might reveal the magnificent palaces of the gods in the underworld. So again, very little evidence Samhain had any sort of religious significance, was associated with the dead. Much later sources retro project that back onto Samhain, but the earliest sources don't say it. We have to go on folk legends that show up in later sources. And again, the data does not really support it has any connection to Halloween, but we're going to get into that a little later.
But Mike, if it wasn't originally a pagan festival for the dead, then why do later Irish and mostly Irish and Welsh sources associate it with supernatural dead encounters?
Well, because the Christians celebrated the dead saints on that day, and so it became associated with the dead because Christians were associating it with the dead. And so then people said, Christians are associating Halloween with the dead. I bet they got that from Samhain. And they just made up legends connecting Samhain to the dead.
Well, yeah, and this sort of leads into a slightly different conversation into, well, why did Christians put All Saints Day on November 1st, and then Western Christians All Souls Day on November 2nd?
Yeah, I just wanted to cover the history of Samhain. Yeah. We're going to get to the history of Halloween after we play a little bit more of the video. I will get to some super chats in a minute, but I'm going to play a little bit more of the video here, and then we will get to some super chats.
Ancient Celts marked Samhain as the most significant of the 4 quarterly fires.
Pause for 1 second.
At the midpoint between the fall.
Just so that everyone in the audience is clear. And Isaiah, if you're watching, I'm not trying to be like mean or pedantic. They're called Celts, and they've always been called Celts. So please, next time you do any sort of video like this where you talk, just call them Celts. It will make everything way simpler and easier for everyone.
Equinox and the winter solstice. During this time of year, hearth fires and family homes were left to burn out while the harvest was gathered. After the harvest work was complete, celebrants joined the Druid priest to light a community fire using a wheel that would cause friction and spark flames. The wheel was considered a representation of the sun and used along with prayers. Cattle were sacrificed, and participants took a flame from the communal bonfire back to their homes to relight the hearth. Early texts present Samhain as a mandatory celebration lasting 3 days and 3 nights, where the community was required to show themselves to local kings and chieftains. Failure to participate was believed to result in punishment from the gods, usually in illness or death.
All right, let's stop there for a minute. Okay, so there's not a lot of good evidence for this. The closest you can get is that maybe there were some sort of fire rites associated with Samhain. But again, the historians I cited will say this comes from later legends, like Hutton will talk about possibly fire rites, but very hard to track down. It's not in the earliest sources. There may have been some sacrifices, but again, they're not. B does not say they're associated with Samhain. He just says they occurred around November. So again, we don't have any actual evidence for these. This is just based on hearsay at this point.
Right.
So no.
And honestly, we really should expect. We really should expect to see evidence for this sort of thing. We shouldn't expect. Well, let me put it like this. If Samhain was this type of celebration, we wouldn't expect for its rites and rituals to be expressed in 12th century documents.
Yeah.
Even after we've already had descriptions of it that we can find in the 8th, 9th, 10th, and 12th and 11th centuries.
It would be in the Sans Cormac. I mean, it mentions the Spring Festival of Beltane on May 1st. It doesn't mention any sort of religious festivals on Samhain. So that's a huge problem for this theory.
Right. When we have, it's a similar thing when it comes to the whole Christmas being like chosen, there being a pagan holiday on December 25th. When you have a source which is specifically detailing how these festivities worked, you would expect it to mention these things, but it doesn't. It doesn't mention these things. These things don't become a thing in terms of the historical record until centuries afterwards. That's the this isn't like just some argument from silence where it's just like, oh well, we don't. No. if I'm writing a book where I am detailing the yearly calendar of America, and I don't mention the idea that Americans all wear propeller hats on March 22nd and pretend as if they're helicopters because helicopters are a fundamental part of our religion. You don't get to say that that's actually a thing. It just was under the radar or whatever until centuries later. No, that's not how that works.
Yeah.
I'm sure that helicopters will become a part of our religion in like 30 years. So.
Of course they will. Yeah. All right, let's get to some super chats. Is Billy Carson Gnostic about Halloween and Samhain? I'm sure he's another one of the crazies that say that Halloween is a pagan holiday. The guy takes every lunatic theory out there and just pretends it's fact, and he won't debate anyone ever. Apparently, someone I know did debate him recently, and it caught him off guard. And Billy is trying to make sure the podcast doesn't go up, but we'll see if he's successful. I hope he isn't, because the guy is just spreads lie after lie after lie. He claimed recently, Will, that the Catholic Church blew up the top of Mesoamerican pyramids so they could build churches on top.
Oh yeah, I actually saw that. I just want to say, based Spanish, but also that the Spanish were a little bit more practical than that. They were like, let's build churches where people can go to them easily. Yeah.
They did build some on them, but I mean, they basically have been abandoned for a while, and they look like hills. So they built churches on top of what had become hills. They never went to Chichen Itza and let's build one up these giants. That'd be these steps. That'd be silly. It's not what happened.
I want more Spanish things where it's like them in the Pirates of the Caribbean movie, where they're just they just come in and just destroy the pagan temple and then just leave. Incredibly based.
Remember to like the video, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think all of you have liked it that are watching, so that makes me sad. Be sure to like the video. What do you think of Rationality Rules' response to you on the Conquest? What response on the Conquest? They didn't post a response on the Conquest. They posted a 2-hour hit piece where they tried to dissect and read into things we said, and they made a bunch of just basically character assassination. They have not addressed Exodus Rediscovered whatsoever. They've not addressed our model for the Exodus. They are just trying to control the narrative around a bunch of mistakes they made instead of actually presenting a model that could compete with the Exodus Conquest model that Dr. Falk and I have presented. So they didn't respond on the Conquest. That was just a crappy hit piece that's riddled with problems. And Falk and I will get to it eventually. And yeah, it's not that good. I already found errors in it. So we'll have some fun with it later. I agree, but many deliverance hunters will use the scriptures about not being partakers of the world or darkness. So I guess you're talking about Halloween, and my first response is, okay, listen. When Paul was writing to the Corinthians and they got the Lord's Supper all wrong, they were treating it like a pagan drunken festival. He didn't say, well, stop celebrating it now because you ruined it. He said, get back to doing it the right way.
Right.
We're not partakers of the world or darkness if we start celebrating in innocent, moral, and holy ways. We could do it. We could celebrate it by honoring the saints. We could celebrate it by just allowing our kids to trick or treat. Say, we're not being partakers of darkness. That's not how this works. You don't get to just become a partaker of darkness by handing out candy or letting your kids collect candy. That's an association fallacy.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that. Yeah.
Oh. Christian Paulogia looks a lot like you. Says, great costume, IP. I didn't even recognize you. Thank you. It's some mask I got a couple years ago.
I genuinely love the fact that someone did a screenshot of this video, changed it to their video portrait, and decided to do a super chat. That's great. I love it.
Oh, he does. Yeah, he does that to me all the time. But you do look a little like Paulo Gia, I will say. You do look like Paulo Gia. So
not Paulo Gia.
Now you can now you must combat him to find out who is the real Paulo Gia. You could be Willow Gia.
Yeah. I will admit his name is actually kind of clever, Paulo Gia. I don't think that I could top that. So
I'm glad he changed it. It used to be Paul Logia, as I was told by everyone who was pronouncing it wrong. And I'll now pronounce it wrong because I'll have that in my head. So,
right.
As a former fundamentalist evangelical, thank you for doing these videos. It was really damaging for me to grow up in a biblical inerrancy, or you to go to hell type church. Your videos help save my faith. Thank you so much, Answering LDS. Much appreciated. And that is great to hear. That is one of the things we do here, is want to make sure Christians don't become atheists, because fundamentalism tends to become atheist. Fundamentalist churches are atheist factories, unfortunately, especially for young people. I'll talk about this later, but the church I grew up was kind of fundamentalist, and all the kids that were not allowed to celebrate Halloween because their parents were super strict, the ones I've kept track of, they're all atheists now, or they're not Christians. They're like New Agers or atheists or something, because that's all you do when you say your kids can't celebrate on Halloween. You just teach them Christianity is about not being fun and being scared of the devil all the time. And eventually kids catch on and go, well, this is a stupid religion if that's all this is about. And they leave and they go out and they're wondering why it's wrong to collect candy when that's not sinful. It doesn't make sense. So yeah, this is one of the reasons I say we should celebrate Halloween, because it's for the kids. And do we really want to teach kids that Christianity is about anti-fun?
And maybe you're someone who still thinks that Halloween is stupid anyway. And you still, and like maybe your neighborhood isn't particularly keen. I'm not sure what place in America this would describe, but like, just so that we're speaking to everyone here, if you want to not celebrate Halloween, you have to replace it with something. If you want to like not celebrate trick-or-treating, or if you want to not do, you have to replace it with something just as good, for all parties involved. Maybe it's not trick-or-treating, but maybe it is still a party of some sort. I'm only saying I have a couple of friends and associates, and they're very firm on not giving their children iPhones. And they're like, okay, well, but what if all their friends have iPhones? Well, it turns out when you have an entire community of people who don't have iPhones, the concept just doesn't come up for the children. You need to actually create something instead. It's like any other addiction. If you want to view it I'm not saying that you should view it in this way. I'm simply saying that if you really want to, there is a much better way to do it than just like a just say no to Halloween sort of situation.
Says the man with the devilish goatee. I do have a devilish goatee. Thank you for noticing. I've been working on my devilish goatee and my incredibly handsome good looks for a long time. Magnificent.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but I've been working on shaving. Or
oh no, don't shave. Well,
no, I'm not shaving. My new job requires that I not have a long beard, and so my beard is much shorter than last time.
Lame, pretty lame.
Fair enough.
Let's get back into the video.
Yes.
Isaiah just basically spends his time reading from this article, so I jumped ahead a little bit because it's just boring, and it's all nonsense. You can see no citations, none.
As the Middle Ages progressed, so did the celebrations of the fire festivals. Bonfires, as Sam Ganagan's, I don't even know how to say half of these, which were more personal saw wind fires near the farms, became a tradition, purportedly to protect families from fairies and witches. Carved turnips called jack-o'-lanterns began to appear, attached by strings to sticks and embedded with coal. Later, Irish tradition switched to pumpkins. In Wales, men tossed burning wood at each other in violent games to set off fireworks. In Northern England, men paraded with noisemakers. And then it talks about dumb supper, which children would play games to entertain the dead, while adults would update the dead on the past year's news. That night, doors and windows might be left open for the dead to come in and eat cakes that had been left for them.
Okay. So he's trying to say the whole custom of jack-o'-lanterns and trick-or-treating comes from this idea of these ancient Samhain customs. Again, utter nonsense. There's no evidence for that. Ronald Hutton discusses this in his great book. He says, Halloween was also notable for the activity of mummers or geysers, figures found at winter festivals in general, but particularly appropriate to a night upon which supernatural beings were said to be abroad and could be imitated or warded off by human wanderers. In Ireland, costumes were sometimes associated with the people who went out about before nightfall collecting for the feast. Use in one district of County Cork brought the Lair Ban, or white mare, a man covered in a white sheet holding a wooden horse's head, like some of the midwinter mock beasts known in England. He notes these are customs that happen in like the late Middle Ages. So you're talking about around 1500s, 1600s, that time. It says the traditional illumination for geysers or pranksters abroad on the night in some places were provided by turnips or mangle wurzels, I guess, hollowed out to act as okay, and often carved with grotesque faces to represent spirit or goblins. They were common in Ireland and found in Sutherland in the late 19th century, but by that time were also well-established local customs in southern and western Somerset. So these are late customs. He notes that this idea of using the turnips, something you don't really get to like 1800s, maybe 1700s, very late.
I mean, I think it's also just useful to note that carved vegetables are a part of, they're a very universal human custom. You have, especially with things like turnips and even pumpkins in the New World, I'm pretty sure, like various types of squash and gourds were decorated or carved in various ways for a variety of reasons. Because when you have an abundance of these relatively easy to grow, big, hard vegetables, why not use it for decoration? And if you're going to use it for decoration, you're going to carve it. Like that's just simply, it is a two-step process to go from we grew too many turnips this year to let's use them for decoration to let's like carve a face on it for let the kids carve a face on it even for fun, keep them occupied.
Yeah, and so Nicholas Rogers says it became customary in many towns and villages for the richer parishioners to offer doles to the poor during Hallowtide in return for prayers to the dead, emulating the medieval custom of the well-to-do who left small bequests for the purpose of parishes. The spectacle of the poor receiving food for prayer at Hallowtide was established by Shakespeare's day. So again, this is something you don't see coming about until around the time of Shakespeare.
Yeah, we're talking early modern era.
Yeah, he notes along these fire rituals was the more extensive practice of souling, the custom of baking cakes or soul cakes. This was established before the Reformation. This food was conventionally distributed to all relatives and poor neighbors who offered to pray for the souls in purgatory, underscoring the belief that prayers and ritual practices could smooth or speed a soul's passage to heaven. This custom was likely revived or revamped by Catholics as a popular response to the emulation of All Souls Day from the official religious calendar by Protestants. And he says souling is important to our investigation of Halloween in two respects. How dare you cough? First, the ritual surrounding souling, in which supplications move from door to door, asking for food in return for a prayer for the dead, bear resemblance to modern Halloween customs. So modern Halloween customs seem to come from European folk traditions that came about in the Middle Ages and the early modern period. These are not customs that came about from pagan rituals associated with Samhain. They date back to medieval periods or Middle Ages, this area,
Yeah. And importantly, specifically, it comes from, these customs come from the practice of the Christian liturgical calendar. Yeah. Now, if you're not Catholic, or if you're antithetical, if your theology is like antithetical to the concept of purgatory or to the intercession or revering of the saints or things like that, I can understand why you would still not want to do those customs full blown in their actual full on Catholic rigor. But let's be honest, when kids go out trick or treating, they're not even doing, much to my dismay, they're not doing it in order to as rewards for offering prayers for the poor souls suffering in purgatory. So that's not even a factor here, and it just becomes largely irrelevant.
Yeah. I mean, again, so people think that just because we have these Halloween customs, they must come from paganism. And, you know, one of the things they note in the Dictionary of English Folklore is that, like, look, people can come up with all sorts of customs about supernatural aspects divorced from paganism that Will was talking earlier. I mean, people had legends of witches and ghouls and goblins from just Christian Europe because people like stories. That doesn't mean these are pagan elements.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't logically follow. So no evidence this stuff goes back to Samhain.
I can't wait for like 200 years from now when we're still telling stories about Batman and people are just assume that must come from like some pagan origin.
Ancient pagans of Ireland worshipped the Batman, or as they used to call him, La Bula Hala, or they'll make up something like that. And this slowly generated. They also worshipped the magic man from a distant planet who became known as it'll be something like that. Like Superman, Batman.
I can't wait.
All right, let's get back into this.
Christian Samhain. As Christianity gained foothold in pagan communities, church leaders attempted to reframe Samhain as a Christian celebration. So here we see taking a pagan practice and reframing it. The first attempt was by Pope Boniface in the 5th century. He moved the celebration to May 13th and specified it as a day of celebrating saints and martyrs. The fire festivals of October and November, however, did not end with this decree. In the 9th century, Pope Gregory moved the celebration back to the time of the fire festivals, but declared it All Saints' Day on November 1st. All Souls' Day would follow on November 2nd. Okay? This is where it merged with Halloween. Neither new holiday did away with pagan aspects of the celebration. No. October 31st became known as All Hallows' Eve or Halloween and contained much of the traditional pagan practices before adopting it in the 19th century America through Irish immigrants bringing their traditions across the ocean. Trick or treat is said to have been derived from ancient Irish and Scottish practices and the nights leading up to Samhain. In Ireland, mumming was the practice of putting on costumes, going door to door, and singing songs of the dead. Cakes were given as payment. Halloween pranks were also tradition in Samhain, though in the ancient celebration, tricks were typically blamed on fairies. I don't know why I'm getting so tongue twisted with all these words.
Because you're lying, and God is trying to stop you from lying.
Yes, because God is trying to prevent your lies from further infecting this discussion.
All right. So the claim is that he says Halloween was a Christianized version of Samhain. Do historians agree? No. Now, I mentioned earlier the Martyrology of Oangus, and there's another date in it. It actually says, this is a 9th century document that comes from Celtic Ireland. It says All Saints' Day was on April 20th. If Christians in Ireland were trying to turn Samhain into All Saints' Day, why were they originally celebrating All Saints' Day on April 20th?
Right. And it gets moved to like May 13th, I think.
Yeah. Well, here's what happened. Hutton tracked down the now. Yeah. Also, be quick. Ronald Hutton is not a Christian. He was actually tasked early on in his career to find pagan origins to help like modern neo-pagans sort of track down ancient traditions. So he started out trying to look for stuff, and he couldn't find anything for his the group he was a part of.
Right.
But here's what he says. He says by 800s, churches in England, Germany, which were in touch with each other, were celebrating a festival dedicated to All Saints upon November 1st instead. The oldest text of Bede's Martyrology from the 8th century does not include it, but the recessions at the end of the century do. Charlemagne's favorite churchman, Alcuin, was keeping it by then, as were also his friend Arno, Bishop of Salzburg, and the Church of Bavaria. Pope Gregory, therefore, was endorsing and adopting a practice which had begun in Northern Europe. It had not, however, started in Ireland, where the Philyra of Oangus and the Martyrology of Tallow prove that the early medieval churches celebrated the Feast of All Saints upon the 20th of April. This makes nonsense of Fraser's notion that the November date was chosen because of Celtic influence. Rather, both Celtic Europe and Rome followed a Germanic idea. The origins of that idea are lost. It may be simply that some northern churchmen felt the need of a spectacular feast at the opening of winter at a time when some form of merriment was badly needed. So merriment was badly needed. So basically, All Saints' Day November 1st started in Germanic and English regions. Then it moved to Celtic regions later on. So it had nothing to do with Samhain.
Yeah, and to be clear, we don't exactly know why the November 1st date specifically caught on in England and in the Germanic and in like, okay, so we're talking about like the time of Charlemagne, talking about the Frankish Empire. So we're basically talking about modern France, Belgium, Netherlands, Switzerland, Northern Italy, and most of Germany, effectively, as well as parts of the Czech Republic. The point is that we don't know exactly why those areas, including the England wasn't really united at this point, but the Anglo-Saxon areas, as well as the Charlemagne's Empire. We don't know exactly why they were celebrating All Saints' Day on November 1st. What we do know is that it doesn't seem to have originated with those areas. Where it actually originated is, I'm just going to talk about this very briefly. The celebration of All Saints as it appears in the Western Church is largely due to the iconoclast controversy, which isn't super clear when you're just sort of looking at it, but it becomes clear once you look into all the details. Well, what's the connection? Well, you see, with iconoclasm, which was a major thing in the Byzantine Empire, but was not a major aspect of the Western Church at all, the Western theologians often viewed this in terms of a cutting off of the saints, and this is especially the case in Rome. And so, what's a response to this? Well, a sort of one is simply the intellectual argument, which is largely what St. John of Damascus does when he's engaging with the iconoclasts during his time. But what the popes often do, or what Rome in general and Italy in general often does, is they try to counteract it by hyping up the celebration of the saints. Well, what's one way you can do that? Well, one way you can do that is by dedicating churches specifically to the celebration of all the saints, or to a large group of saints. So we have dedications of particular chapels to all 12 of the apostles. We have great collections of relics under particular sets of altars as dedications to a great variety of saints. And then we also have the dedication specifically after, and this is not the Pantheon in case that's what anyone was thinking, but we have the dedication of a specific altar within St. Peter's, which was dedicated to all the saints. When was that dedicated? Well, according to the most early sources, it was dedicated on November 1st. Am I saying here that the Charlemagne, the Holy Roman Empire, which encompassed France at this time, and the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms definitely got their November 1st date from Rome? No, I'm not saying that. Alcuin didn't spend that much time in Rome throughout his life, so it's unlikely that he specifically picked up the custom from there. But Rome is in very close contact with the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms and with the Frankish kingdoms at this point. And it's not unreasonable to say that there is a connection between the specific why the Germans and English took the November 1st date. I don't have any specific evidence for this. I'm saying that this is, to me, a perfectly plausible explanation. I'm offering this simply as a plausible explanation because I don't think that we actually have the answer for why the Germanic peoples selected November 1st for their feast day, for the feast day of All Saints.
Well, Nicholas Rogers thinks the celebration of All Saints actually started with Spanish churches, and then it spread to the French churches, and then it spread to the Germanic and English churches. And then they picked the November 1st date, and then the November 1st date spread to the rest of Christendom.
Yeah, and honestly, that's totally plausible as well.
And what I will tell people is this: is like it landing around the same time as Samhain. You don't like to hear this, but it's probably just a coincidence,
right?
And I also say coincidences happen, especially when you have Roman pagans, Greek pagans, Egyptian pagans, Persian pagans, African pagans, Celts, Scandinavians, Germanic pagans, who all have multiple gods, who all tend to celebrate like stuff around the harvest and stuff in the spring when you're planting. You're going to have some holidays line up around the same time, given the vast amount of pagans and the vast amount of gods they had and the vast amount of holidays they had for those gods. Like people try to say Valentine's Day is connected to Lupercalia, even though it isn't, because they're like one day apart, but they're not connected at all. Again, given the vast amount of holidays pagans had and the variety of pagans, you're going to have some connections or at least some coincidences line up on dates. Just because All Saints Day ended up on November 1st, that doesn't automatically prove it's connected to Samhain. There's no evidence of this connection.
It is funny to me because the earlier Roman date for All Saints Day was like May 13th, I think. Yeah. And people say, oh, well, that was chosen because of a different Roman pagan feast day or something. I don't remember which one it was. It doesn't really matter.
It is always do that.
Okay, but the funny thing is, though, they actually have a much better case than the people saying it came from Samhain, because there actually is some association.
Looks like Will froze there a little bit. Let's see if he comes back. Anyway, while he comes back, I'm gonna go to some super chats here because he is definitely frozen. All right, are there any sources for the supposed darkness or earthquake during the resurrection that aren't under suspicious scrutiny? I don't know. There are those mentioned, like I believe the one by like Thales and Pelagian, but they're not. We don't have their original works, so like we can't really say too much about them. So unfortunately, I don't think there are, but I mean, again, it just if the Gospels are reliable. Oh, we did do. There has been some seismic research on the area, and there was an earthquake, I believe, in 33 AD in the area. I think it was like a 6, somewhere between a 6 and a 7-point earthquake. So we do have some evidence of an earthquake happening at that time. So yeah.
Back.
Oh yeah, you're back. About time. You were like super frozen and we couldn't hear anything.
Yeah, my internet literally just disconnected.
Yeah, happens. Why do you use the mind quantum digital physics argument rather than more popular arguments, or rather than more popular arguments for God's existence, seeing as physicists, philosophers don't agree with the supposed philosophical implications? Well, if I based my beliefs on what physicists and philosophers say and not on the evidence, I would never be like I would be a sheep. I don't care what their opinions are. I care if they have a good argument against the arguments for God's existence I've presented. And so far, they have not presented, I would argue, good arguments for that. So yeah, I'm just not convinced that, look, I'm not going to base my beliefs or what I think is true based on popular opinion. I'm going to try to follow the data. And so, if they don't agree with the philosophical implications, okay, that's fine for them, but I'm not going to care. I want to see what their actual arguments are. Okay. Let's try to follow the evidence, not what we want to be true. Are you finally fixed or not?
I don't know. I'm technically living with my parents, so I don't have my own internet.
You bum, you.
Yeah.
Have you seen Rationality Rules' new video on you? It's 2 hours long. LOL. Yeah. If you actually sit and watch it and agree with it all, you really hate me because it's just a 2-hour hit piece. It's not even like responding to like a lot of what I said or argued for in Exodus Rediscovered. So it's at this point, they're just, if you're actually going to sit and watch that and think, oh yeah, this is great, you're just incredibly biased. You're not interested in the data. You're just interested in hit pieces on me because you're very angry and biased. I found it quite hilarious. I think when we respond, we're going to skip over a lot of that nonsense and just try to get to some actual substance in it because it's nonsense.
By the way, I did just want to say it's Lemuria. That was the Roman pagan festival that they associate with why All Saints Day was chosen on May 13th, which does actually have to do with the debt. So again, there's a better argument there than there is for the other stuff. But honestly, I just think it has to do with the dedication of the Pantheon.
Yeah. You forgot about the holy hand grenade. Yeah, that's what I said in my reply to Billy Carson.
Of course,
I said,
the holy hand grenade of Antioch.
That's how they blew up the Mesoamerican pyramids. They used the holy hand grenades.
It's one of the many holy relics that Brother Maynard carries with him. I can do that entire scene. It's really bad.
You have to. That's required when you go through RCIA.
Yes. Well, yeah. I don't think few know this, but like you actually have to go through. You have to memorize at least 2 full scenes from Monty Python and the Holy Grail in order to become baptized Catholic. It is a requirement.
This video is blaspheming the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit. Yes, very much so. Are you talking about us, John, or are you talking about Isaiah's video? You didn't specify.
I wonder if he's talking about us. I would love to hear the explanation for that.
Thank you for correcting the pronunciation on Celts. I was wondering, could it maybe in some areas or times pronounce Celts? Because you have the Celtics, like that basketball team up in Boston. The Celts. Aren't they called the Celts?
If it is, it's wrong. I mean, I know that so it comes from a Greek word, the Keltoi, which I believe was invented. Well, maybe not invented, but it was used by Herodotus to talk about like the people north of him, basically. And the kappa in Greek basically always makes a hard k sound.
So wait, is Cephas then? Is it not Cephas? Is it like Caiaphas or Cephas? It really,
it's really what it would be something along the lines of Kepas.
Oh, so that's really the best way to say it then.
Kepas. Make sure that you're putting like some extra breath behind the P. If you really wanted to pronounce it to our best approximation of what it probably would have sounded like, it would be something like Kepas.
Man, learning so much now. So wait,
Yeah.
then is I've heard people pronounce Tacitus as Tacitus. Is that right too?
Tacitus. Yeah.
Wow, you're blowing my mind. I've been pronouncing all this wrong for so many years.
No, you're pronouncing it the normal English way, but with Celts, it's like, and even in modern, even in pretty sure even in both medieval and modern English, it's basically always pronounced Celt. The C always makes that sound.
I've been saying Celsus because I heard Bart Ehrman say that, but I guess it's Celsus then.
Celsus, yeah.
Man, I'm gonna have to try to fix all this, and then really.
Celsus might be a Greek name, so I guess it would technically be pronounced like Kelsos, but I remember
English bothers me. It's so
my father recently asked me how would you pronounce Socrates? How would Socrates have been pronounced in Greek? And I'm pretty sure it would have been. I think there's an omega after the sigma, so it'd be Socrates.
Socrates. I'll say that from now on. Really just like sound like
totally. Yeah. Everyone will understand what you're saying.
Socrates. Yeah. Oh man, I hate English. I'm gonna pronounce the C's in these ancient names like the sea and ocean. So it'd be Socrates. Or Chelsis or Paschitis. Really bother people.
Just make sure. Actually, no. Start saying Okeon, which is actually how you pronounce the original Greek word Okeanos. Okeanos.
Yeah. When are you going to teach me Greek?
When you start paying me.
What to think about? I might do that.
I technically have. I've been a Greek teacher for 2 years now, so I have minor qualifications.
I might take you up on that. I might actually do that soon. So
good, because I could actually use the money.
Okay. We'll work something out maybe. All right. Let's get back to this lovely video from our good friend Isaiah.
Wicca and Samhain. A broad revival of Samhain resembling its traditional pagan form began in the 1980s with the growing popularity of Wicca. Wicca's celebration of Samhain takes on many forms, from the traditional fire ceremonies to celebrations that embrace many aspects of modern Halloween, as well as activities related to honoring nature or ancestors. Wiccans look at Samhain as the passing of the year and incorporate common Wiccan traditions into the celebration. In the Druid tradition, Samhain celebrates the dead with a festival on October 31st and usually features a bonfire and communion with the dead. American pagans often hold music and dance celebrations called the Witches' Ball in proximity. All right, so here we see complete pagan, completely demonic, all about the dead, spirits, fairies, and somehow, you know, the Catholic Church the Pope tried to merge this in and make it All Saints Day, which is what we'd call Halloween. So you already see here from a secular publication, absolutely pagan.
All right. Well, I just love how he kind of admitted that a lot of these ideas that Halloween is pagan come from Wiccan LARPers pretending that they're actually pagans doing stuff. Like he brought up the Wiccans, and the Wiccans just like made up a bunch of nonsense. They pretended a lot of our modern Halloween, Christmas customs are actually pagan, and like they're not actually.
And what's hilarious is that they believe it if you talk to them.
Yeah,
they actually think that it's true. It's kind of funny if I'm being honest. But also, like, okay, just as a side note, Gregory the Fourth is really the one who Pope Gregory the Fourth is the one who really like makes it so that November 1st is the celebration for All Saints Day across the entirety of the Western Church. It's about the entire point of that had more to do with people on both sides of the Rhine. It was almost strictly about the Franks, just in general. I forget, was Louis the Pious still ruling at the time? I don't remember off the top of my head, but Charlemagne's son, Louis the Pious, was he and the intellectuals associated with his court and stuff like that. There was a debate about when to celebrate. Okay, so basically, here's the thing. You have the Roman liturgy, which was enforced on the Frankish Empire by Charlemagne. And so now there becomes a whole bunch of different questions about, okay, are we going to be in conformity with Rome on this matter? Are we going to be doing this way? What which of our previous customs do we get to retain? And there's a whole bunch of different complications that come after Charlemagne decides to do this. And the point is that, okay, well, we have this feast day of All Saints. Are we going to sort of create a universal calendar? And among those disputes is the specific dispute about All Saints Day. Well, you have many people throughout the Frankish Empire saying, yes, we should do it on November 1st for this, that, or the other reason. And Gregory IV seems to be specifically about supporting this effectively unifying effort when it comes to the calendar. It has basically nothing. It doesn't have anything to do with anything Irish is the thing.
Right. Yeah.
The reason All Saints Day is on November 1st has like nothing to do with the Irish. That's the thing that gets me about this. Like the Irish weren't even a part of the conversation at the time.
They were too busy drinking. We didn't
exactly
have time to,
as they should have been.
More important things to do up in Ireland.
Exactly.
So let's look at now a Christian publication called the Bible Info, and we'll see what they have to say. Okay, now I want to look at Bible Info, which we've already talked about a lot of this, but it's what does Halloween mean? The word Halloween literally means the evening before All Hallows Day. Celebrated.
These are some heavy-hitting sources, ladies and gentlemen.
On November 1st. Halloween is also the short name of All Halloween, All Hallows Evening, and All Saints Eve, which was celebrated on October 31st. The origin and meaning of Halloween derived from the ancient Celtic harvest festivals. But more recently, we think of Halloween as a night filled with candy, trick-or-treating, pumpkins, ghosts, and death. So we already went through the history. I won't go through all of that. It's very similar to what we already went through. Should Christians celebrate Halloween? As a logical thinking person, consider for a moment that what you're celebrating and what Halloween is all about. Is it the holiday uplifting? Is Halloween pure? Is it lovely, praiseworthy, of good report? Philippians 4:8 says, finally, brethren, whatever things are true, what are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there's any virtue, and if there's anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. Is Halloween based on godly themes such as peace, freedom, salvation, or does it bring to mind fear, oppression, and bondage? So it's a good question to ask. During the celebration this day, are we thinking of things that are good and pure and holy and righteous? And the answer is no.
Okay, whose fault is that? I mean, like, what, like, are you literally trying to blame the day for you having impure thoughts, Isaiah? That's a very weird argument. This day is making me think evil stuff. Okay, fix it. Fix it, Christians. This is what I'm sick and tired of hearing this nonsense from Christians. They keep saying they want Christianity to influence the culture, to sway the culture, to guide the culture. And then they're like, quick, Halloween's coming. Run and hide. Listen, you can't have it both. If you're upset that secularism is taken over and then you run and hide when secular things happen, you're part of the problem. This is why this video is titled as it is. Christians can and should celebrate Halloween. Why? You keep complaining we don't control the culture anymore. Secularism has taken over. Here is a perfect opportunity for Christians to turn Halloween into a more godly holiday as it originally was. What are you doing hiding in your house every Halloween instead of going out and giving candy to children? Like, isn't Christianity about giving food to people? Like, isn't that one of our virtues? And like, the perfect holiday to do it. And everyone's like, quick, hide, the devil's going to get you.
I'm not sure you want to compare almsgiving when it comes to food with candy, but
listen, it gives you energy. I don't want to hear
it. Okay. Well, anyways, to give a more just to give a practical thought, I'm a localist, if any of you know what that means, and as such, I think that one of the most beneficial things that Christians can be doing is not focusing on like trying to recapture the culture by means of some blockbuster movie or something like that. Yeah. So let's start simple. Let's start small. Get your friends together, have a Halloween celebration, make it fun. Make it something that people want to come back and do again next year, because it was like so enjoyable. And make it, and you can do that. You can make it be really fun. It doesn't have to be a Bible study or anything else that people find like boring or anything like that. You can make it fun. You can make it perfectly like clean and joyful and pure. even if you don't want it to be a celebration of like all the saints, make it a celebration of certain like biblical stories. I don't care what you want to do with it, but do something fun with it. It is a perfect time to do it. And as a side note about like whether or not Halloween is pure or whether or not like thinking, imagine if you did that, applied that to like any other aspect of our culture, and it was like, can you participate in jazz? Well, jazz was associated with a lot of promiscuity throughout the 20th century or whatever. Therefore, you're not allowed to study music or anything like that. Your mic is muted, by the way, just so you know.
No, I'm clutching my pearls over here when you mentioned jazz music. Them hooligans out there.
What's your, well, actually, I'm not going to ask that. I was going to say, what's your favorite kind of music, but we don't need to talk about that now.
I've been doing a lot like modern like trap music lately. I don't know. I kind of enjoy it. Or like, I don't know, just some relaxing stuff. I don't know. Just trying to playing around with stuff. I don't know. But yeah.
I've been listening almost entirely to recreations of medieval music recently.
You want to see what I went to a Halloween party as over the weekend?
Yes, I think that would be amazing.
You have to get the joke though. Do you see the joke?
So I'm going to guess it's a priest and a rabbi walk into a bar.
Yeah, you can see we walked into we walked into a bar. Get it? Bazinger.
I'm a big fan of those jokes because I think that they're hilarious.
Yeah. People kept asking, "What's on your head?" I'm like, I walked into a bar. But unching.
Yeah,
it's so stupid.
It's good. My favorite one, just because it's so simple and so stupid. Two guys walked into a bar, but one ducked. Yeah,
that's kind of what we were going for. But we had to both walk into the bar. It was the only way I thought it would work. So let's get back to Isaiah telling us to hide from the candy and the children in costumes because it's so demonic.
Additionally, does the Bible sanction witchcraft, witches, and sorcery? On the contrary, the Bible makes it clear that these practices are an abomination to the Lord.
Don't practice sorcery on Halloween.
Yeah, guys, you don't, Isaiah, for the love of God, like, not like what sorcery you're participating in when you take your 5-year-old out to collect candy. Can you explain that to me, buddy?
Sorcery should be killed. And then Deuteronomy 18:9 adds, when you come into the land which the Lord your God has given you, you shall not learn to follow the abominations of those nations. There shall be no one found among you who practices witchcraft or a soothsayer or one who interprets omens or a sorcery or one who conjures spells or a medium or a spiritist or one who calls up the dead. For all of these things are an abomination to the Lord. So is it wrong to celebrate Halloween? Let's look at what the Bible adds to this topic in Ephesians 5:11. Have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. So this text...
You know, I'm starting to think these anti-Halloween people like Isaiah are actually paid by the dental industry to go out and tell everyone, stay away, ladies and gentlemen. Like, it's evil. Because, you know...
Well, that's almost what I'm saying. It's like, if you don't want to do Halloween because of the fact that you really don't want your kids getting addicted to sugar... I still think that's still a little much, but like, okay, fine, whatever. But here's the thing. The problem with this interpretation, it's like you need to understand when you are arguing this way what you are doing. You are effectively saying that modern neo-pagans are allowed to take anything that was originally Christian and corrupt it and make it so that Christians are no longer allowed to associate themselves with that thing. The very least, do go the Puritan route and just like say that Catholics are satanic and like therefore we're not going to even celebrate anything. We're not even going to celebrate Easter. It's just going to be normal Sunday or whatever. That's more consistent. It's still dumb. It's still going to turn your kids into atheists, but it's at the very least more consistent.
Yeah.
Is calling us not only to have no association, but also to shed light on these topics around us. As stated earlier, Halloween was not exposed by the church for what it was. Rather, it was incorporated into church holy days.
Lies.
And are Christians responding in the same way today? As you think about Halloween, its origins and what it stands for, would it be best to spend time dwelling upon its themes or shed light upon what lies below the surface of this holiday celebration? God is calling humanity to follow him and to come out from among them and separate, says the Lord. Do not touch what is unclean, and I will receive you. That's 2 Corinthians 6:17. So it's clear this is an unholy holiday. It's an ungodly holiday. Now, Wikipedia has the similar origins of what I discussed. And look,
ladies and gentlemen, we're about to get to my favorite part of this whole video. So hold on to your butts.
Look at what it says on Wikipedia. As well. Bonfires, guising, mumming, divination, saying, veneration of the dead, feasting. It has the date, you know, all the stuff. Okay, so it talks about Samhain, all the background. Now, some people would say this is all made up. What's the source that's connected to Halloween?
Here we go.
Look at all the sources here.
All the sources.
So for those of you that are like, give me some sources.
Okay.
These are all references and sources of how this is pagan. Look at here, the pagan religions of the ancient British Isles, their nature and legacy. Oxford, page 327. I mean, all.
Okay, so of all the sources for him to highlight.
Oh, it was perfect.
Let me go back. Let me make sure I get it. He's highlighting Ronald Hutton, the guy I quoted earlier, who said,
yeah, the guy you've been citing throughout the course of this video.
Like, tell me you didn't read any of these sources, Isaiah, without telling me you didn't read them. You literally just looked at a Wikipedia page and went like, it probably agrees with me because I'm right. Let me go show you all the sources. And the sources show you're wrong.
Purely as a tangential thing, have you read Robert A. Davis's article? I forget if you mentioned this.
Maybe. I don't know. I've read a bunch.
The Escaping Through Flames one.
I don't know.
Okay,
maybe a while ago. Yeah,
I'll show it to. Anyway, I thought it was pretty good as well. It more or less repeats the same points that we've been making. But
so if you look at the actual Wikipedia article, it doesn't actually show you that Halloween is a Christianized version of Samhain. Neither do these sources. Notice the other source 15 on the screen is the book I cited, or no, it's not that book, but it's another one of the scholars I cited, Nicholas Rogers. So he's saying these sources show that Halloween is from Samhain, and these sources debunk this nonsense. It's like, dude, Isaiah, you're talking to this video got 60,000 views. You told 60,000 people you're right, and you literally put sources on screen that show you're wrong. If any of your audience were to actually do research, they would be amazed at how little you have done. Is this the actual picture you want to show your audience? Is this the kind of picture you want people that are not Christians to see? That this is the kind of research Christians do? This is why I'm so much harder on Christians, because you make us look bad when you do this stuff. Anyone who's done an ounce of research would see how bad this is. And it's just, it makes the body of Christ look so bad when you do this.
Right. And it's especially unfortunate because of the fact that Christians, okay, so just as a little side comment, I did actually do quite a bit of, like I mentioned, I did some background research just to review everything for the purpose of this video. And I will admit, it's fascinating to me looking up this stuff on the internet and seeing just how utterly ubiquitous the exact same neo-pagan narrative is. This thing along the lines of the History Channel, because it is true that when you just simply look at the Wikipedia page, it sounds as though what it's saying is correct. Chat GPT or whatever AI that they're doing for Google, which it just summarizes like the top like blog posts from neo-pagans and stuff like that. The best article that I could actually find on the subject from this perspective was someone saying, so you know that one legend that everyone points to as being like a major showcase of Samhain being a pagan festival or whatever. I think it's useful to note that those gods didn't actually meet on Samhain. They met like a week before, and Samhain has like no celebrations associated with it. I'm like, oh wow, someone actually mentioned something that you realize as soon as you read any of the things that people cite. Yeah, it. But also, I was just going to say, I actually did look at some of the sources which were cited on the Wikipedia page for both Halloween and Samhain as being, as being like showing that it came from a pagan holiday and stuff like that. One of them was like an Anglo-Saxon one of them was like by an Anglo-Saxon scholar, and I thought it was fascinating, the claim that he was making, because it was just simply about how like Christians simply adopted the Samhain celebrations into their thing. I went to the source. He doesn't cite any the scholar doesn't cite any documents. The closest that he gets is he cites a letter from Gregory to Augustine of Canterbury about not just simply destroying the pagan temples, but instead destroying all the idols inside of the pagan temples. And then he just goes on to say that this was the practice, and so the Christians just simply adopted the Samhain customs. That's it. That's there's no citation beyond that. And so Wikipedia's source for this particular argument is a book which has no source. And if you cite a source which has no source, you haven't really cited a source unless you're like citing the original thing.
Yeah, and that's why I cited a bunch of original sources as well as scholars. You know, you got to do that. So David Folks in the chat, welcome. He's going to be on my channel soon. We're going to get that scheduled and figured out. He said, I had someone today unsubscribe from my channel over a Halloween special. It's
nice.
You gotta love the legalists. They are something special. Answering LDS says the recent rationality rules convinced me that Kip and Josh don't care about evidence and are either being deceptive or just too proud to admit it. Oh, you just wait. We've got some stuff coming. You're gonna. And again, at this point, it's just ridiculous. They're responding to a stream and they want to do like 8 hours of content to respond to it, as far as I can tell. Like at this point, they're just trying to control a narrative. They don't even want to discuss the Exodus at this point. They just want to control a narrative. And we're going to show some deceptive tactics that they've already employed. And so there's no way at this point they come out looking clean. Like there's an old saying, less is more. And there's a reason, because sometimes you say too much and it backfires, and they have
just look at us
in that role. Is it sinful for my boyfriend to dress as a royal vampire on Halloween? It's really an awesome costume, and it doesn't look as scary as a Black Panther costume, which was his second choice. Well, no, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And here's my reasoning for it. You're not celebrating it. In some ways, you're kind of mocking it. Because let's say vampires were real. Like, let's say these demonic reanimated dead bodies were real. You're using them as a costume to sort of mock them. I don't really see it as a way you're honoring them or you're celebrating them. I don't see it as that bad. Now, maybe people go a little too far with like the gore and the covering everything in blood and really just getting into it. But I think a vampire costume, I mean, come on. I mean, like,
yeah, when it comes to something like a vampire, no one is dressing like a, what are they called? I don't remember the original like Romanian word, but no one's dressing like one of the actual animated dead creatures that has to constantly suck blood in order to. Funnily enough, zombies are actually the closest approximation to what vampires were in like Romanian folklore. But instead of like eating brains, they would like drink blood, but they were largely mindless creatures and stuff like that. No one is actually doing that like at all.
I think it's fine, because again, like what if you're aggressive like Morbius from Marvel? Like,
yeah, well, that's the point, is that when people are dressing as a vampire, they're dressing as Dracula, like Count Dracula from the Dracula story, which maybe it's not a great idea to dress like an evil character, but is it a sin to dress like Fire Lord Ozai from Avatar? It's debatable at the very least.
I think if I saw someone dressed as Sauron, I'd be like, okay, that's cool. That's a cool costume. I'm not gonna be like, it's evil. You're sin. Like, come on.
Sauron has a pretty cool look in the Peter Jackson movies. I will admit.
Don't people like at like Protestant churches, like they'll do plays sometimes, like the evangelical churches, and someone dresses as the devil? Is that evil?
Yeah, Strigoi. That's what it is. Sorry, I found the word.
Listen, here, Carmel. Thank you for the super chat. Longtime supporter of the channel. I would just say for your boyfriend, apply 1 Corinthians 8. It's not sinful unless you're causing someone else to stumble. if you're going to go to a party dressed as something like a vampire and some child there is going to see it and they're going to get really obsessed with vampires and they're going to go down a dark path, consider that. But if not, I think it's fine. So I would say just apply 1 Corinthians 8 to something like this. Took a religious class at university, and there were a lot of ex-Christians. Seemed all their reasons for leaving the faith included fundamentalist tendencies like not being able to celebrate Halloween. Exactly. And that's what I encounter a lot. You get a lot of these fundamentalist churches are atheist factories. They teach children that Christianity is about being scared of the devil constantly and avoiding fun constantly. And it's horrible. That's not what this is about. I mean, Jesus said he's Lord of the Sabbath for a reason. The disciples were drinking and eating because you feast and you celebrate when the bridegroom is here. There'll be time for fasting later, but now is the time for celebration. So yeah, that's absolutely what happens. And so we need to combat these fundamentalist tendencies because it's destroying Christianity from within.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say something, but I don't even remember what it was, so it doesn't matter.
Jesse says God is trying. I guess he was referring to tongue twisting Isaiah.
No, he was referring to me losing my connection.
Oh. After seeing all the atheists online grasping at ad hominem makes me think we could use more Alex O'Connells in the world. I think you meant Alex O'Connor. Yeah, I want to review one of his videos soon. I need to figure that out when I can get that set up. Why do you think they make it so hard to find out the truth of any research? I just don't think I think a lot of people don't want to. Like, I think people they get set in their ways. They get a certain thing, and when you publicly proclaim an idea or a theory, you kind of in your brain, you think it's part of your identity now because it's the way the community perceives how you are and what you are. And so people tend to defend them after they have publicly stated something they think is true, even if it's just incredibly wrong. So I think there's also just the fact that when you're really going into figuring out the truth, there's work involved. You need to actually read what people are saying. You need to spend time, and it might not be the most pleasant time in the world, especially considering the fact that many scholars don't have the best writing style, just saying. But it's not particular. I'll be the first to admit I'm not a scholar by any means, but I have a bachelor's degree. I'll admit I don't particularly enjoy reading a whole bunch of people that I've had to read in order to do research for particular subjects. It's kind of just something you have to do, but it's not particularly enjoyable work, and it's stuff that takes a little while. And so in order to actually confirm that what you're saying is correct, you need to sit down and do something which might be unpleasant. And I honestly think that's a large part of it for a lot of people, is that they just aren't willing to do the basic work for it. Yeah, it's unfortunate. But I mean, I think people also, they like a good story. This is something N.T. Wright said. It's that people want to live this story. This is why the conflict thesis is still around. Atheists have this story of religion bad, science good, and they fight, and we're on the good side. Right. They don't want to lose that story. I think it's kind of the same with the whole Halloween pagan. You have evil Halloween pagan. We're the good Christians with our shield and swords, and we're going to fight but really, that's not what Jesus would want. He would want us to use what tools we have available to get the gospel out and to show that we're a loving community that's welcoming, that wants to serve, instead of hiding and reading the Bible on Halloween night with our children who are going to grow up to be atheists because they're being taught Christianity is about anti-fun. So I think people need to drop the narrative, and I think they don't want to drop the narrative because they like feeling like they're on the side of good, and Halloween looks evil and dark and scary, and we don't want to be on that side. And I think it has a lot to do with that story they have weaved. So let's play a little bit more of Isaiah here, and let's see where he's going. Again, look, very hard to find a good screenshot with him for the thumbnail. Did the best I could.
I think you did pretty well.
This is tied in and where the history comes from. Okay, so literally 125 sources of the history.
They don't all agree with you, Isaiah. You did not look at the 125 sources. We know.
And then secondary sources are linked here as well. So I think it's a total cop-out for people to say there's no sources, that's not accurate, Halloween is totally fine.
That's right, folks. We're copping out. There's no sources, but he didn't look at any of the sources.
the thing is that when you actually do look into the sources, the vast majority of the time they don't cite to any. That's the point. So they don't. This is just simply all of the Samhain pagan Halloween stuff was something that was just repeated over and over again, even in scholarship. That I'm saying that, like, it is something which even scholars simply repeated over and over again over the course of several generations.
Did you know that Julius Caesar was an alien? And I can prove it to you. Look, here is an article on Julius Caesar. And I want to go down here. Look at all the sources it mentioned. Oh, see, Julius Caesar was an alien. That proves. I proved it. Pay no more attention. I win.
But yeah. Well, honestly, if you want to go that route, you can prove anything. What I mentioned, I forget if he actually ever does talk about the Wikipedia article for Halloween, but for those of you who haven't read the Wikipedia article for Halloween, it's fascinating. Going to the history section, the first part is Christian origins and historic customs. I'm not going to share my screen because if any of you want to do it, you can do it. I swear that entire section demonstrates how all these different Halloween customs come specifically from non-Celtic Christian groups, like the Bavarians. It talks about how a lot of this stuff comes from like Bavaria and northern France and like Western Germany and stuff like that. And then in the very next section, it goes on to talk about how this, that, or the other thing actually came from Samhain. And it's like, hold on a second. I thought that like 30 seconds ago, you guys were saying that it came from some random Bavarian village out in the middle of the Alps.
Uh-huh.
Now it's suddenly a Celtic pagan thing.
Yep. That's how it works. That's how it works. They just make it up as they go along.
Right. I mean, it is
trick-or-treating. Well, can I just take my kids trick-or-treating, Isaiah, on Halloween?
Yes.
During some Celtic celebrations of Samhain, this is another article here.
He keeps saying Celtic. Man, he needs to stop watching basketball and read a history book.
Villagers disguise themselves in costumes made of animal skins to drive away phantom visitors. Banquet tables were prepared and left out for unwelcome spirits. In later centuries, people began dressing as ghosts, demons, and other malevolent creatures, performing antics in exchange for food and drink. The custom was known as mumming, dating back to the Middle Age, which is what we do modern-day trick-or-treating.
Well, if he found it on the internet, it must be true. We all know there's never any incorrect information on the internet.
Do you really think people would do that? Just go on the internet and tell lies?
No, never. Never will. People don't tell lies on the internet. It's illegal.
Exactly.
By the 9th century, Christians had spread into Celtic lands where it gradually blended with supplanted older pagan rites. In 1000 AD, the church designated November 2nd as All Souls Day. Poor people would visit the houses of wealthier families and receive pastries called soul cakes in exchange for a promise to pray for the souls of the homeowner's dead relatives, known as souling. The practice was later taken up by children who would go door to door asking for gifts such as food, money, and ale. Again.
Okay, so
I actually love this part specifically because of the fact that it demonstrates that he is fundamentally incapable of distinguishing paganism from something that he doesn't do, like a religious practice that he doesn't do.
Yeah.
Because like he literally reads out All Souls Day. Does he know that All Souls Day is like a thing? I'm guessing he probably has heard of it before. Like it's still a modern thing within the Catholic Church. Okay, so what do you have here? Where does trick-or-treating come from? It comes from Christians trying to teach their children to do to offer prayers for the souls in purgatory, because that was an essential aspect of being Christian back then.
Yep.
Well, how do you do that? Well, one way that you can teach your children to do stuff is you give them rewards for it. Okay, well, how about they do it for treats and stuff like that? Maybe that's not even a good idea. I don't care. That's not the point. It doesn't matter whether or not it's a good idea. The point is that this is where it comes from. So, okay, well, that very easily evolves into a custom of going around the village or going around the town or the city and getting offered treats for praying for the souls of dead relatives. You might think that praying for the souls of dead relatives is a false doctrine. You might not believe in purgatory. That's not what I'm talking about here. But unless you want to say that Catholics aren't Christians, that it's still a Christian practice, which originates in a Christian context. That's the point that I'm making.
Yeah. Remember to like the video. There are 435 of you watching on YouTube. Be sure to like the video and spread it around. You can put a super chat in. We'll go through those in a little bit here. Let's get back to some of this video. So yeah, trick-or-treating is Christian origin. And the modern idea, really quick on origin of trick-or-treating was it didn't directly come from this. What we saw in the early 1900s is people were going around on Halloween, especially kids, and they were destroying property. They were, just egging places. And so people said, well, we have these older customs of going around asking for soul cakes. Why don't we just have like a modern version of that? And that seems to be the origin of trick-or-treating. It's that people recently, very recently, look back into the history to try to deter kids away from destroying property. And they came up with Halloween parties and trick-or-treating. In America, trick-or-treating is actually very much an American custom.
Right.
Sort of the old souling custom.
Right.
Absolutely pagan. Absolutely pagan.
No.
Kids dressing up, going
Apparently I'm
around
absolutely
asking
pagan.
rich people for gifts, saying they'll pray for their dead relatives.
This is what you were just saying. Like, kids going around dressing up and asking for prayers is apparently pagan, according to Isaiah.
I mean, like I mentioned, I'm so used to the pagan accusations against my religion at this point.
I need to go full screen for this. Listen to me, folks. You go door to door asking for prayer, you're a pagan. You better repent. You better ask people to pray for you. No, don't ask people to pray for you. That's pagan. So you do. You know what I mean, right?
No prayer in Christianity. If you pray too much, then you're pagan.
You're pagan. Pagans. Pagan. Only pagans go around.
Only pagans pray.
Pagans.
So you might say, well, can't we just redeem Halloween? But the word redeem means to buy something back, and God does not want this holiday. God does not want to buy back this pagan holiday. So
who are you to speak for God, Isaiah? And it's not pagan, it's Christian. So yes, we should redeem it. Like, you have not actually made your case.
You might say, well, isn't Christmas pagan?
No.
I'm not going to go into that in this video.
No.
But the bottom line is this. Christmas does not promote gore, death, darkness, and evil spirits. Halloween does. So that's the argument. It promotes things contrary to our faith. Again, Ephesians 5 says, have no fellowship, but instead expose them. It glorifies Satan. I posted an article 5.
So this is, a lot of people use Christmas as an excuse to be greedy or gluttonous, to be drunkards. That doesn't mean we have to participate in that. Just because people use Halloween as an excuse to celebrate death, that doesn't mean we have to. Like, I'm going to take my daughter trick-or-treating in a couple days, and she got a pirate costume for me to wear. Is that evil? I'm dressing up as a robber with a boat. I mean, like, does that mean I'm evil?
Yeah, pirates are evil, and you should never. No, okay. Yeah, I would genuinely like to know if, just to go back to my music example earlier, you could make the argument that given genres of music, very much promote profanity, adultery, greed, envy, honestly, all 7 of the deadly sins, if while we're here, especially if we're talking about something like hip hop. Does that mean that someone could never try to do a good version of any of those sorts of songs, that no one would be able to enter into the pop scene? Well, maybe that would be a good idea for other reasons. But the point is that it's not like music would... It's not like music is off limits to Christians. In fact, the fact that the music industry and just music in general is so full of sin is a specific reason for why Christians should be creating actually good counteractions to that. Because God isn't praised or revered or glorified by the fact that one of the gifts that he has given to us has been completely corrupted. You need to uncorrupt it. That's the point.
Listen, I will die on this hill. The peak of Christian music happened when Be Thou My Vision was written. And since then, there's been some good stuff, but that was the peak of Christian music, is the song Be Thou My Vision. So I will die.
I'm not going to comment.
Yeah, you won't.
5 reasons Christians should not celebrate Halloween. I'm going to share with you
Oh,
those
here we
reasons I
go.
gave. Very quick, very concise. Number 1, it has pagan origins. We've talked about this in the video.
False.
Even the History Channel would admit that. Halloween has historical ties to pagan festivals. Number 2.
So real quick, even if it did have pagan origins, that wouldn't be a reason we could not Christianize it and make it something holy, moral, good for the community. So this is a bad argument. Just because something is pagan, that doesn't necessarily mean it's evil.
Occult and witchcraft.
Oh, God.
The connection between witchcraft and the occult and Halloween is undeniable. This is not something Christians should be celebrating. God detests witchcraft according to the Bible.
All right.
So I'm much more of a scholastic person element, and so I'd like to. You can't just simply point to some vague association. Tell me specifically, what is the connection between witchcraft and Halloween? Because it's only if I understand exactly how witchcraft or sorcery or whatever is associated with Halloween that I'm able to actually judge whether or not that has any effect whatsoever on whether or not I should be celebrating the festival.
Here, I want to pull up this. This is the Satanic Temple's calendar. So this is the actual calendar. So a holy day for them, February 15th, April 30th, July 25th, October 31st, December 25th. They celebrate Sol Invictus. So they do weird stuff, witchcraft, whatever it is, on Christmas. Does that mean we cannot celebrate Christmas, Isaiah? Isaiah, serious question. Because the Satanic Temple does stuff on these dates, are we not allowed to ever do anything? What if someone was born on February 15th? Can they not celebrate their birthday on that day? Just because these knuckleheads associate these days with witchcraft, that doesn't mean we have to. That doesn't logically follow. We can do whatever we want on these days. I don't care what the Satanists are doing. It's a really weird argument. Just because witches may do weird stuff on October 31st, that doesn't mean I'm not going to take my kid trick-or-treating, because the Bible says we have the Holy Spirit with us. Whatever they're doing doesn't affect us. We can go around and do whatever we need to do, and they can go do their make-believe little spells or rituals, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't affect us. Who cares?
And it's also just kind of funny because of the fact that if you read the little blurb that they have under the Halloween celebration for the Satanic website, it says those steeped in religious dogma. Like, why do the Satanists celebrate Halloween? Because of people like Isaiah. You're the problem. If you're watching this video again, like, you are part of the problem that you are trying to combat. Mm-hmm. I need you to understand that.
Number 3, fear and darkness. God has not given us a spirit of fear, and one of the main themes of Halloween is fear. We are called to be the light of the world, and why would we celebrate a holiday that promotes darkness? Number 4.
What? That's such a... What? It promotes fear, therefore stay away from it. Well, maybe you should have the... Like, it's just such a
simple
dumb argument.
solution.
I can't even, like...
Don't watch the horror movies. Just do what I do. Just don't watch the horror movies.
Yeah, it's such a dumb argument. My brain can't even process it. I didn't watch this part of the video until now, and I'm just like blown away by how bad these are.
Or morality. Most costumes promote violence, gore, or sexual themes that directly go against Christian morals.
Yeah, then don't wear those.
Number 5, alternative beliefs. Participating in Halloween condones beliefs and practices that don't align with our faith. So most of the practices involved with Halloween celebrate New Age and false religions. So my final thoughts is this: but Isaiah, what if my kids miss out? And my response is, don't you want them to miss out on fear, gore, death, lust, and everything else Halloween promotes? Halloween promotes things that are ungodly and unrighteous, things that we as Christians should not be celebrating. I don't see the reason why any Christian should celebrate Halloween. This is my opinion.
It's a crappy opinion. Okay, so just like this is just okay, Isaiah. All those reasons you committed were logical fallacies. Those were association fallacies. You're saying Halloween is associated with fear, lust, gore, blood. Therefore, it's evil. That is a logical that's a logical fallacy. If your argument is fallacious, you don't have a good argument. And the reason, again, why I don't want my kids to miss out is because A, it's harmless to let your kid dress up as a princess or a superhero and go around and collect candy. What you're basically saying is don't go out and have fun. Don't be a part of things that are completely harmless. And you're basically going to teach them throughout their life that Christianity is anti-fun and we have to hide from the devil because he's more powerful than what the Bible says. And you're going to push people away from the truth and from the body of Christ. That's why Christians can and should celebrate Halloween. There's nothing wrong with it. And if your entire argument is just an association fallacy, you don't have a good argument. Sit down and do some research.
Yeah. Celebrate Halloween and make it better. Not just simply make it more clean or whatever, but honestly make it more fun. Because let's be honest. Let's just be clear here. Despite the fact that things like Halloween or Christmas are fun, the secular world is really good at turning stuff which is fun into something which is absolute drudgery for almost everyone involved. To the point that I've taught students where they made it sound as though they're doing trick-or-treating and like, yeah, they're kind of glad to get the candy, but for the most part, it just feels like an obligation at this point. I've taught every single grade of student, so if you are wondering which one I'm specifically talking, it varies. But the point is that you can do something which is both more innocuous than the current secular versions of things, and is also more enjoyable. I think that we have this conception, and I mean, C.S. Lewis, I have some disagreements with C.S. Lewis, but C.S. Lewis actually does a really good, a lot of his life was about restoring joy and how this is actually essential to living a Christian life.
Surprised by joy. Yeah.
Even morally, yes, surprised by joy, yes. But even morally, like the Screwtape Letters talks about how one of the tasks of the demons is to get us to the point where when we enter hell, we will say, I realize now that I spent my life doing neither what I ought nor what I wanted.
Yeah.
And one of the things that allows the patient to finally go on a major conversion and start to turn his life around is the fact that he just simply was able to enjoy a couple of very simple things. And Halloween can be like that. In fact, all the great Christian feast days, the liturgical calendar was meant to provide a rhythm to our life, a rhythm of feast and fast, of preparing for major celebrations, and then also having those major celebrations and having fun and enjoyment for all the things that God has given us. Halloween should be a part of that. And if not Halloween, the very least All Saints Day. I'm all for bringing back the All Saints Day octave. It's not even a thing in the Catholic Church, but 8 days of All Saints Day celebration is amazing, and should totally be a thing.
And Will's Catholic, and I know a lot of my audience is Protestant. Like, you know, like, again, like, why not celebrate Reformation Day?
Sure.
If you want to do that. I mean, like,
and have a party. Make it fun.
Yeah, make it absolutely. I went to a Halloween party this weekend, and I will go again next year. I mean, like, I don't understand. Like, so when I lived in Illinois, I attended a Baptist church. I no longer would consider myself that, but like every year they did a big trunk or treat at the church, and they had games, they had candy, they had all costumes, and it was a huge service to the community, especially a lot of the poor people in the area, that really enjoyed that kind of stuff. And you see these fundamentalist Christians like not taking advantage of that opportunity, and they're going to slow the spread of the gospel. Churches should be the #1 places people should go on Halloween to get candy, to celebrate their kids. You know why? Because that's where they should go to feel safe, instead of walking around neighborhoods. Why churches should host trick or treat things? That would be amazing. Especially you got all this space. Use it.
Well, yeah, we're not only missing an opportunity for merriment, we're also just missing opportunities to do things like care for the poor, provide for people's needs, build up communities and stuff like that. Communities aren't built by people wanting to be with each other. That's not what a community is. I know that's how we often think of communities. Communities are built when there is a common goal that all the members of it are trying to, well, they're working towards completing, which is why real communities have a whole bunch of people who don't even really like each other all that much. They're not entirely composed of people who don't like each other, but the point is that they're all working together and they all love each other, but just don't like each other. Maybe they do like each other, but they don't have to, is the point. I'm not explaining this very well. I'm very sorry.
I think you're doing a good job. But let's get to some super chats here. I'm sick and tired of talking about this. I think we got the point. How do your
everything?
Yeah. How does your near-death experience video account for new data and surges on brain activity and DMT production during resuscitation? Also, how do you respond to the Greek influence on the afterlife on the Old Testament and New Testament? Okay, so I don't think that's there because the Christian afterlife is centered around the resurrection, very much so. And when Jesus is arguing for the afterlife against the Sadducees, he quotes Exodus 3, not Greek scriptures. He says that God appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he said, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Therefore, he's the God of the living. In other words, he didn't say, I was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because they're still in existence. So Jesus used the scriptures. You can see aspects of that throughout the scriptures. When it comes to DMT research, there was actually a guy named Rick Strassman who wrote a book called The DMT, the Spirit Molecule. He actually wrote about his experiences doing research with subjects who were taking DMT. Now, I don't agree with everything in the book, and I'm not sure how true it is. Let me throw that caveat out there. But he was convinced that when he put people under DMT, they were actually encountering beings from other dimensions. That's not my view. That was his view. So maybe the whole DMT thing is not really, I wouldn't go there because you can actually cite some researchers that think that when you're on DMT, you're actually encountering other beings. Now, I'm not sure how true that is. I don't want to, put my flag on that hill. I'm not sure yet, but it is interesting that maybe that's not the place to go. And so in my irreducible minds here, as I talk about a lot about the brain activity, I don't talk about that specifically because I'm not sure where I land on that, but you get the idea. I don't think DMT necessarily proves near-death experiences are not true, especially if you have someone like Rick Strassman saying, no, when you go on DMT, you're actually encountering beings. And the reason why he said that is because some of his subjects kept encountering the same beings, that they were disconnected from each other. They had not read his prior research, and they're both coming back having the same experiences. So he thought that was remarkable, and he came to believe that. Now, again, not sure if I'm convinced, but it is something to think about. Legalistic Christians are progressives of the right. Yeah, in some ways you can find similarities between the radicals on the left and the right, for sure. IP dropping them mics. Yeah, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the super chat. Andre, how do you pronounce that? He says, dressing as Sauron from Rings of Power is a sin. That is true. I will give you that. If you do that, you are sinning.
I saw that earlier, and I was like, yep, definitely.
I pray to God they cancel that. Again, did you finish season 2? Because I didn't even finish season 2.
I watched the whole thing.
Okay, I couldn't.
I can't say with certainty that what they did in episode like 6 or 7 was more stupid than the pouring water into the volcano causing it to erupt eternally thing. It wasn't quite that stupid. Maybe it was that. It was pretty close to that stupid. I'm not sure if you've seen this. The orcs decide that they were going to turn catapults, which are like on wheels.
Oh, I did see that.
Okay, you did see that.
Yeah. Yeah, explain it.
So, okay, basically, so the orcs are besieging Eregion, which magically grew walls, which were never shown. It was never shown. I'm serious. If you look at previous shots of Eregion, it didn't have walls, and then suddenly it has walls, because there's no continuity in this show whatsoever.
No.
And the orcs are catapulting like rocks. Someone call them a trebuchet. You could technically call them a trebuchet. It doesn't have like the string for extra. It doesn't matter. Let's just call them trebuchets for the sake of whatever. You have trebuchets. It was it's launching these massive rocks into it, you know, like a siege across a river, which is kind of silly because you really should be filling in the river. Okay, so what's the orcs' problem? Well, the orcs' problem is that they can't get through the walls. The actual problem is that they can't get across the river unless they get onto the bridge. But for some reason, that's not like brought up. And so what they do, they're like, oh, I know. We're going to need to bring our siege weapons closer. So let's turn the catapults, which are on wheels, and they're not like, it's not, they're just like turning them as if it's on like a Lazy Susan or whatever. And then they fire rocks at the surrounding mountains, the mountains surrounding Austin Death Hill, to break the rocks so that it will cause like a so that it will dam up the water, and then they'll be able to bring siege weapons across the river.
That's not how anything works. You can't just shoot rocks at a mountain and cause an avalanche.
Yeah, that's. I love what someone said.
And then if it somehow magically dams up the river, it's still going to be muddy. So your siege weapons are going to get stuck in the mud.
Well, not to mention that it doesn't understand how dams work, because if you don't redirect the water flow to somewhere else, then the water will still keep. It will just go. It might take a couple of minutes, but the water buildup is going to go over the dam. Like the water flow didn't. They didn't do anything to stop the water. It's video game logic, and it's not even particularly well. It's like Super Nintendo levels of video game logic. It's not even like modern video game logic.
Who gave them a show? Those people behind that show are some of the.
I mean, as I said in my review of my rewrite, there was even in like the planned season 4, I was like, okay, this is going to be the time where it's like I'm going to have to really stretch out the timeline over the course of the season and stuff like that. How would I do it to make it satisfying? I don't know. But if you gave me 4 years and $1 billion, I would absolutely be able to figure it out.
Hopefully they just cancel it and redo and like remake it. That would be the smartest decision.
I hope they don't remake it.
Goat Hub says they took the fun out of fundamentalists. Yeah, and they put the dumb in fundamentalists as well. What are your thoughts about people rejecting creeds because they are man-made? Well, that's stupid. It's a stupid argument because, like, okay, first of all, Bible translations are man-made. I mean, most people don't read the original Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, so they're accepting things that are man-made. And most of these people belong to churches that have doctrines and like statements of faith that are man-made. So like it's a stupid argument. It's just it's a double standard. And you shouldn't reject the creeds. Like they're there for a reason. Like the Nicene Creed is essential for defining what Christianity actually teaches, what the scriptures actually teach. They don't come from out of the ether. They come from the scriptures.
Yeah, I mean, just as a point of fact, at least when it comes to Catholics and the various Orthodox, you're more or less required to accept the creeds, especially the Nicene Creed. Catholics have a couple other creeds. So technically there's a Chalcedonian Creed, which both Catholics and the Greek and Russian Orthodox churches and those associated with them have to accept. Catholics also used to Catholic clergy used to recite what's called the Athanasian Creed every single Sunday at 7 a.m. So used to be a major part of our tradition. There's also what's called the Creed of the Council of Trent, which for some reason they also added the Vatican I stuff about the Pope onto the Council of Trent Creed, but didn't call it the Vatican I Creed or anything like that. I don't know. But point is that there are a lot of creeds in Catholicism, and you're more or less required to accept what they say. Just something to keep in mind for people considering.
Will is not just Catholic; he's a super Catholic. He's like a Shiite Catholic. He's so Catholic.
Yeah, I don't even accept contraception. On that level.
That's good. We need to we're having a population crisis as we speak, and birth rates are declining. So
exactly right.
Now I know where people are getting Celtic, not Celtic. This explains a lot about people in my personal life. Man, thanks for the stream. We'll share. Yeah, much appreciated, Gabe. Yeah, it's. I think that's the.
I'm not sure they're getting it
Celts.
specifically from Isaiah, but
yeah, I think that's why in the Boston they call them the Celts. They probably have that misunderstanding about the Celtic Celts. You know,
that might have to do with it.
Oh, I was really big into basketball back when Michael Jordan was playing because he had the same initials as me, and it was like a thing. So I'm not into it anymore, though. Young Earth creationism is pagan because pagans believed in a young Earth. Checkmate fundamentalists. Boom.
I mean, some pagan schools of thought did actually believe in a newly created Earth.
I would drop this mic if I could, but it's stuck. So
yeah, most didn't. Most believed in a sort of eternal Earth, an eternal world. So
well, I mean, there are some Hindus that I think have like dated the Earth. There are some Hindu texts I think date the Earth, not like 6,000 years, but it's like 50,000, 100,000.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, and you get the Aztec calendar. I think I try to remember exactly, but I can't.
True. It depends on it depends on which paganism we're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I'm stupid, but I thought, hi, stupid. I'm Mike, but I thought Will had a cool house. Then I noticed the green screen. I feel like I'm being scammed.
Hey,
yeah, we are being scammed. You're pretending to be rich over there. Look at you with your library and fireplace in the background. This is absurd.
Okay, no, hold on. The reason for why I did that is because this is what my background looks like.
Look like a mugshot.
It's awful, and so just this. Okay, let's all be honest. This looks way nicer, and so that's why I did it.
You could have dressed as Trump as getting his mugshot for Halloween, and then it would have been the perfect background.
Yeah, I'm sure I would have done a great Trump impression.
This guy is also teaching exorcisms on his channel. Isaiah he's telling people.
That's not good.
Listen, if I need an exorcism, I'm going to the Catholic Church. They're the experts. I feel like they got.
We have a lot of experience. Let's be clear.
Like I'm not going to Isaiah. I'm going to someone who knows what they're doing. And I watched a Matt Fradd interview. So Pints with Aquinas, he interviewed an exorcist. Mm-hmm. It was really fascinating. It just is like, yeah, this is the guy I would want to go to if I had an exorcism. It's not. And
to be clear, even if you aren't Catholic, there's simply the aspect where you have to keep in mind that demons, they will often know your very secret sins that you've been trying to keep from everyone else. And there's all sorts of demons are very intelligent and they are very powerful, and they will know how to manipulate you as better than any human could possibly manipulate you. Unless you are specifically trained, not only like mentally and physically, but spiritually as well, it is extremely dangerous to try and confront a demon straight up.
Did you
simply like arrogantly stating that you have the power of Christ in your hand or whatever, and therefore you're able to denounce demons? It doesn't cut it.
Did you ever see the video I did? There was a guy on TikTok, and he got really big because he said he was doing rituals. And
is this the Muslim guy?
Yeah, he was a Muslim, and he was basically saying that like oh my gosh, what? Let me find it. I could just find the video and see if I can put it up. Yeah, here it is. Like I can pull it up. Let me see if I can. Well, give me a minute here.
I love how this stream has derailed.
He basically said like he contacted demons and they told him to believe in the Quran. It's like, oh, you talked to demons and they said to believe in the Quran. Guess what I'm never going to believe in? Hold on, I got it here. I think it's let me see. I think this is it here. This one.
Doing rituals with spirits, and you are asking for information, and that spirit actually cares about you and gives you the truth, they're going to give you the Quran.
You heard it here, folks. Convert to Islam. It's what the demons want.
Now, most people don't understand this, and they hate when I say this, but if you're doing your rituals correctly, demons actually can't lie to you. They are bound to tell the truth. Demons cannot lie to you if you're doing your ritual correctly. Emphasis on doing the ritual correctly.
Oh, yeah, sure. Sounds legit. I'm sure that's what the demons wanted us to think when they invented occult rituals for humans to contact them. What?
I've genuinely always just wondered who told you that. And like, okay, also, who told you how to do the rituals?
Yeah.
What? Okay.
Well, he said in another video, he said, like, I spoke to them, and when you do the rituals correctly, they can't lie to you, and they teach you the Quran. That's why he's a Muslim now. I just saw, like, you just made the best apologetic for anti-Islam I've ever seen in my entire life. The demons want you to become a Muslim, ladies and gentlemen. So now I'm thoroughly convinced that what Muhammad spoke to was fallen angel.
Yeah, even if Islam isn't actually demonic, I think anything can be manipulated by demons, and false religions are the prime example of something which can be very easily manipulated by demons.
Can you just imagine what the demons are thinking? Like, they're like, this guy is contacting, they're down there and they're like, is this guy for real? He wants us to tell him what to believe. Okay. Islam. Definitely not Christianity. Like, thanks. Now we know what the demons want. Great.
Right.
A Catholic saying make Reformation Day a party is unironically one of the most ecumenical things ever.
I'd rather you make it a party than just be boring and do nothing that whole day.
Exactly.
No, I'm serious. Like, Protestants need some more merriment in their life.
Absolutely.
And
you get some of the Protestants that are like anti-alcohol, which is one of the craziest things when Jesus said his blood is wine.
Because, well, you see, the Bible says that it's a sin to drink alcohol. Where? I don't know, but apparently it does somewhere.
Somewhere in the ether. It says that.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of the
Second Opinions, chapter 34, verse 1. Yeah. Unto you I issue a new commandment, and so it came to pass that thusly they heard the Lord spake unto them, alcohol is a sin.
And listen, there are Christians of all variety that try to be so holy and so righteous, they forget that part of life is having fun. And
right.
So they think they're doing something good, and they end up just becoming a Pharisee-like person. And we need to avoid that. You're not going to be perfect. Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath. He is the bridegroom. Act like it. Christianity is about celebrating this, that we are living in Christ's kingdom now. When we are no longer under the Mosaic law. We're under Christ's law. And so there is some celebration that needs to happen there. And so it's not all about just trying to be super holy. It should also be about finding the joy of life, as C.S. Lewis would say. Sounds like poison perception fallacy, similar to the association fallacy, where one identifies icky things as poisoned that must be avoided. Is that a real name of fallacy? I would wonder. I've not actually.
I haven't heard of it, but that's not super surprising. I haven't heard of a lot of fallacies I've learned recently.
I don't think it's a real one. I think he just made it up, but I like it.
Micah, you forger.
Yeah.
You forger, you fallacy forger.
It's a good one to go on. But yeah, it's just a bunch of association fallacy nonsense. Think you'll ever respond to the Byzantine Scotus on his response video to you on young Earth creationism and the early church fathers? Yeah, I like Gideon. I don't know if I will. I just don't agree.
So the only thing I'm going to say, and Gideon, if you're watching, you're free to do however long of a response you want to this part, to this like small set of comments. The church, the point about like the church fathers in their interpretation of scripture is that if they have a specific interpretation of scripture, then that is what is considered to carry some form of authority. The fact that they didn't interpret the scripture in a particular way when there was variance of opinion doesn't make that interpretation of scripture off limits. And because okay, the point is that if there's a great variance among the church fathers about a particular interpretation of a passage, what that means is that a given interpretation wasn't handed down by the apostles to the early church, at least so the argument would go. And therefore you can't simply say, oh, well, you know, none of the church fathers interpreted it in this way. And so therefore, I'm not even explaining this correctly because anyway, point is that the fact that the early church fathers don't interpret scripture the way that, say, many theistic evolutionists would interpret Genesis doesn't inherently mean that the theistic evolutionary person's whatever interpretation of Genesis is wrong. I don't think that was the exact argument that Gideon was making in his videos on young earth creationism. But I also just don't think the arguments in general were particularly good.
I got to read this next super chat a certain way. Super Catholic, the new hot superhero, to the Bible Mobile.
I need to get a Bible Mobile. One day when I'm rich and famous as a world-class author.
We had when I was in the military, there was a guy who was like a super like King James only fundamentalist, and we called his van Bible Mobile because he had like stickers all over it, like on the sides, on the front, on the back, like. And he was a little crazy, like a little out there.
I mean, anyone who's a King James onlyist is kind of crazy. Let's be honest.
Kind of. Let's leave that out. They're just crazy. Like, yeah. There's no other way to put it. Yeah.
King James onlyism is like the Mormonism of actual Christianity, in that it's like a belief which is so obviously false that you wonder why anyone believes it.
Absolutely. Check out Joel Eschmeyer, Shameless Popery, has an episode on the pagan non-issue and Halloween. Very good. We should stop ceding ground to Satan. Yeah, I've not heard who that is. Do you know who that is?
Yeah, Joe Heschmeyer. He's a Catholic apologist. He did do a video on Halloween recently. Honestly, I thought it was pretty good. Granted, he's very specifically responding to the History Channel video on Halloween, and so he's responding to five specific claims. One, that there was a large unified group of people called the Celts. Two, that they had I don't remember all the claims, so I'm just going to do the ones I remember. Two, that they had a specific festival called Samhain, which had like all these religious associations, which was the end of the year. Three, that therefore this was a time of this was like a time between years, and therefore it was almost like a liminal space between this world and the next one. And then there's also like, he responds to the claim that this is where bonfires came from or whatever.
No one ever did a bonfire without.
The funny thing is that
stealing from pagans. bonfires
probably come from like prayer candles and prayer fires and stuff like that.
No. The Christians didn't know how to light things until they saw the pagans doing. Like, we should do that.
Okay, but it does remind me of one article by Tim O'Neill that he posted a very long time ago. I don't remember when or what this was in response to, but people were saying like that like certain atheists were citing certain Christian practices where they would light candles and say that was taken from paganism. And the guy's like, okay, the only reason for why lighting candles sounds pagan is because of the fact that you live in a time with electric lighting where where you can light the inside of your house during a ceremony, the inside of a house during a ceremony with lights.
It's some of the stupidest reasoning I've ever seen. Just anything. Christians cannot come up with any ideas on their own. They just have to constantly keep stealing stuff from pagan rituals.
I wondered what would happen if I just turned off my lights.
Wouldn't be surprised if Muslims say that Halloween is somehow Islamic in origin. No, they don't at all. They say the opposite. They lean into the pagan nonsense. They're very much like, it's so evil and pagan. How could you ever participate in it? And the same lies that spread around. They don't. There are some of the chief misinformation spreaders on TikTok when it comes to the origins of Halloween, and they never correct themselves. It's really annoying.
I can't do the Dawa guy voice, but I'm like tempted to do like the you Christians, you celebrate you celebrate something with paganism, and yeah.
Oh, you see, it's pagan. It's kind of like that.
Oh my.
No. It's we're probably going to respond to a Muslim apologist on my channel soon, because he replied to testify, and good God, was it some of the dumbest stuff I ever saw. I mean, it's just like I can't even get into how bad the video is now because I won't shut up. It's just some of the stupidest.
Yeah, we're already 2.5 hours into this stream.
Yeah. How can we combat the former Satanists who come out against Halloween? John Ramirez. It sounds like trolling and fear mongering to me, but I have friends who take them seriously. Just show them the facts, like what we've done here, and like challenge them on their claims. John Ramirez claims to be a Satanist. He was really into, I think, like, what is that religion that is in like the Caribbean? Santeria. He was into Santeria. Oh. And so that's what I'm pretty sure. And even if I'm wrong, John Ramirez is still wrong about all this stuff, because just because Satanists do stuff on Halloween, that doesn't magically make it evil. Just because they do stuff on Christmas, that doesn't make it magically evil. So just use basic logic, show that they're fear-mongering, show them the true origins of Halloween. You can use the slides I use here today, just screenshot them, and show them what the truth is.
Oh yeah, the fact that someone's a Wiccan or a Satanist or something like that doesn't mean that they have any more access to information or knowledge of history than anyone else. In fact, with certain groups like Wiccans, it's almost a certain indication that they have no idea what they're talking about. So if the claim is I was a Wiccan and we used to do particularly evil stuff on Halloween, I'm like, okay, yeah, you probably did.
And
okay, exactly. That's all that there is to that. There isn't anything else you can really draw from that besides that's when we did really bad stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure that is when you did really bad stuff. Yeah, because in our American culture, we've associated Halloween with evil.
What if all the Wiccans got together and they decided they're going to start celebrating Easter the same day the church celebrates it? So they calculate it based on the spring equinox and the moon, and they start having this big Wiccan or witchcraft festival. Does that magically make Easter evil? No.
Yes, it means that we're no longer allowed to celebrate Christ's resurrection.
That would be silly. And the same stuff with Halloween. Like, just use, like, again, it's pretty. John Ramirez has some of the dumbest arguments against Halloween I've ever seen. It's just more association fallacies. So just point out that there are association fallacies and ask them to explain to you why it's evil to go trick-or-treating because somewhere in the woods in Kansas somewhere, a witch lit a candle. Like, give me the reason. All right. So we're at the end of the super chats now. So you guys can all relax, go celebrate some Halloween, get some candy, and everybody calm down for the love of God.
Happy All Saints Day.
Happy All Hallows Eve, ladies and gentlemen, and happy All Saints Day, and then happy All Souls Day.
Yes.
All right. I will probably stream later this week, and I'll be streaming again. Again, we're going to stream every Monday on this channel at 8 Eastern time. So come back next week at the same time, and we'll be streaming here. And I'm going to try to stream throughout the week as well. So I'll see you guys next time. I should be back on my channel soon. I will, but definitely Monday for sure. So we will see you next time.